A recap of Deadhouse Gates by Steven Erikson, Malazan Book of the Fallen, Book 2. Prologue. Unta. Felisin Paran. A cull of the nobility of Unta has started, orchestrated by the Empress Lazine and overseen by her adjunct Tavor to appease the commoners, letting them take their frustrations out on the nobility while also getting rid of Lazine's enemies. An acolyte of Hood, totally covered in flies attracted to the blood he smeared all over his body, is moving through the round where the prisoners are chained, awaiting their punishment, which is to be taken to the Otadral mines and being pressed into forced labor. Felisin Paran is chained in a line with other nobles and political prisoners, those unpopular with Empress Lazine. She worries that the priest is walking towards her. Heboric, a historian and ex-priest of Fënor, laughs at her fear, and asserts instead that the priest is moving towards him. Heboric is handless, and otherwise completely covered in a tattoo of a boar, with the head on his face, even down to hooves tattooed on his feet. Once the fly-covered acolyte arrives, Heboric challenges him to return to his temple, but the flies explode outwards, causing panic as they dissolve into nothingness, revealing that there was no acolyte inside the flies. Felisin is called to by Lady Gayson, a noblewoman further up the line. She appeals to Felisin to talk to her, meaning to Felisin's sister, and now adjunct to the Empress, who hasn't spoken to Felisin in months, even when their father died. The thug between Felisin and Gayson is introduced as Bodan, who believes very few of the people in the line will survive the approaching walk through Unta, past screaming mobs to the slave ships. Tavor rides past, accompanied by her aide, Tambur, and a bodyguard of red blades, and Felisin reflects on Tavor abandoning House Paran after their brother, Geno's disappearance on Genabakis. The line starts to move forwards through the colonnade, and the mob attacks the line of nobles, consistently getting past the guards holding them back, giving the impression that this butchery of the prisoners is actually being orchestrated. None of the peasants dare attack Heboric, however, who protects Felisin as well as he can, and Bodan, who is killing any who come near him. At one point, a large breach of the soldiers occurs, and Bodan beheads a now unconscious or possibly dead Lady Gayson with part of the chain holding them in order to satiate the bloodlust of the mob, who are horrified by his brutality. They eventually walk to the slave ships waiting to take them away to the Otadral mines. Chapter 1. Pampotson Odin. Mappo Runt and Icarium are resting at the edge of the Pampotson Odin. They have recently traveled through Erliton, and Icarium is unconvincingly disguised as a Tano spirit walker, his skin having darkened to olive green. They are observing an Aptorian demon under the control of Shaik, and mention that it is there because of a convergence, which they say is several months away. They decide to track the demon, and Mappo packs away their entire camp into his small bag before they move on to the Odin. During the following night, the pair rest in some ruins in the Odin, and Icarium notes tiny claw marks around the bottom of many of the pillars. They mention that this is most likely Grillin, a diver's rats. A gathering is approaching, as shapeshifters, divers, and Soul Taken both follow the path, believing it leads to ascendancy. Icarium wants to follow them as he hopes that the pathway might help him recover his lost memories. They are then approached by Rilandaras and other divers, this one in the form of 6 desert wolves. Rilandaras toys with them until he discovers their identity, at which point he asks their permission to continue hunting the Aptorian demon. He mentions that he has never heard of Shaik, but Icarium and Mappo agree he will soon. Hizsar. In the imperial city of Hizsar, historian Diker and the Gistal priest, Malik Rel, stand watching the chaos as Wiccan horse warriors disembark from their ships. Diker reflects on the chaotic situation the Empire has found itself in 7 cities, and how their commanders weren't up to the task of controlling it. He also doubts that the new Wiccan fist, Colton, is likely to last very long. In conversation with Rel, Diker reveals some details about the magic deadening effect of Otadral, but says it is still mostly a mystery. Culp and an unnamed captain arrive, as tensions on the quay between the Wiccans and the harbor guard begin to rise. They discuss the choice of Colton as fist, and conclude that he has the best experience for the job, having led an uprising against the Empire himself, previously. Given the situation in 7 cities at the moment, there is a strong possibility that the entire continent might rise up in rebellion due to the year being the year of Drigna, and a rebellion had been prophesied. The situation on the quay looks to get out of hand, but Colton, the wildest looking of all the Wiccans, asserts total control of the situation, and leads his Wiccans away in perfect formation. Erliton Coast. Fiddler, Crocus, Kalam, and Absailor along with Moby are on a fisher boat headed for the Erliton coast. Fiddler is feeling very seasick, and his mood is generally grumpy. Fiddler reflects on their travel from Genebakis, where they had split up from their squad and army and passed through Karakarang and Rutajelba on their way to Erliton. Eventually, a large number of flying fish go past, preceding the arrival of a denrabi, an enormous marine predator. As it draws closer, they realize it is a soul-taken, explaining why it is in such shallow waters, but Fiddler and Kalam have a surprise for it if it gets too close. The soul-taken denrabi tells them it is unfortunate that they witnessed its passage, and now it must kill them. Kalam warns it to stay away, but it ignores the warning, forcing Fiddler to fire a rather special quarrel at it, tipped with a cusser. The denrabi's head is blown apart. A few hours later, they sight land and spot riders along the coast. They decide to lay low as much as possible, because they have no wish to be found by Imperial soldiers since their army has officially deserted. Because of this, they land on the coast instead of sailing all the way to Erliton. Crocus demands the truth of their journey, wanting to know why they didn't simply sail to Quantali to take Absailor home, the idea behind the journey in the first place. Fiddler and Kalam explain that they're going after Empress Lazine to try and kill her, and that they're in 7 cities because it is about to rise in rebellion, and because of one of Quick Ben's hunches, who is there. Shaved knuckle in the hole. Chapter 2. His Tsar. Diker wanders from the heart of his Tsar to the edge and notes that with the year of Drigna approaching, there is a continued increase of secretive symbols daubed on all the city's walls. He is frustrated that his warnings to the Malazan High Command about the importance of understanding these signs seem to be going unheard. The historian enters a newly established traders' camp outside the city, successfully posing as a Dasan Pali native, and witnesses a circle of seasons where a seer gives the following prophecy: 2 fountains of raging blood. Face to face. The blood is the same, the 2 are the same, and salty waves shall wash the shores of Viraku. The holy desert remembers its past. Having given the prophecy, the seer collapses dead to the ground. Shaken, Diker withdraws and spots a man in a cloak who seems to be watching him. The historian hurries back to the Imperial compound nearby and makes his way to a meeting with the new Fist, Colton. Also present are the priest Malik Rel, Culp, and another Wiccan officer, Bolt. Bolt and Colton relate a tale from the Wiccan rebellion, when Bolt had stabbed Diker with a lance, and Dujek had slashed his face open with a sword in return, while Bolt's horse had bitten Dujek's arm, which later had to be amputated, giving rise to the name One Arm, whilst Bolt was left with a scarred face for life. Sormo Nath arrives, a boy carrying the soul of a great Wiccan warlock, whom Lazine had put to death in the aftermath of the Wiccan rebellion. He reveals he was the figure who had been following Diker. Sormo and Diker agree they witnessed something of great power, and Diker states his belief that rebellion is imminent, a notion which Malik Rel dismisses. Rel passes on High Fist Pormquil orders that Admiral Nock is to leave with the Sahul fleet for Aran as soon as possible, whilst the 7th Army is to march to Aran overland to be inspected before its final stationing. Bolt points out that this would be a retreat in such times, and dismisses Rel from the council, mocking him. Diker points out that Rel basically governs 7 cities from Pormquil's shadow, then gives some historical background information about Empress Lazine and her old circle of allies, most of whom have since vanished. Colton appoints Diker to his staff, after which the council concludes. Culp and Diker find an empty room and discuss the events. The mage confirms to Diker that Sormo really is the powerful warlock he claims to be, and Diker asks for Culp's help to rescue Haborik from the Otadero mines. Erliton. In Erliton, Fiddler stands reflecting on the city's past while watching Red Blades ride past. The Red Blades are hated by their fellow 7 cities natives, for they have sworn absolute loyalty to Lazine, and are carrying out a violent crackdown on followers of Drigna. They have just killed a few dozen natives, and the area is in chaos. Fiddler spots a hunchbacked pimp rushing into an alleyway with two girls, snatched from one of the victims, and follows the man. He is still disguised as a growl, and the pimp is all too keen to sell the girls to him, especially once Fiddler takes out his long knife. He escorts the girls back to their home, and though initially suspicious, the family are very relieved to see the girls safe. Fiddler is invited in to share a meal and meet the girls' grandfather, which he accepts. The grandfather is a Tano spirit walker, who sees through Fiddler's disguise immediately, even as far as knowing him for a bridge burner after a few questions. Upon hearing Fiddler plan to journey overland to Aran, the spirit walker cautions him, and explains about a convergence of divers and soul-taken, called the Path of Hands. Once it is clear that Fiddler will not be deterred by the danger, the spirit walker says he will instead give him protection. He offers to sing the story of the bridge burners, for a Tano's song has great power, even the potential for ascendancy, and it would only need a moment's contact. But Fiddler recoils at the thought of the spirit walker reading his memories in order to know the song, so instead accepts a conch shell, invested with songs of Viraku's past as well as the spirit walker's own songs of power. As they say goodbye, the spirit walker lays his hands on Fiddler's shoulder and thanks him again, identifying himself as Kimlock. As he walks away, Fiddler realizes that the last Malazan to talk to this infamous spirit walker was Dejek One Arm, 11 years previous, negotiating the surrender of Karakarang to Malazan forces. Fiddler returns to the others, and they all agree that rebellion isn't far away, from all the symbols on walls. Other symbols are appearing though, seeming to indicate the direction of the Panpotson Odin, where Fiddler and his group are heading. They are symbols of the Path of Hands. Later at night, Kalam is sneaking about the city. He visits a man named Mibra, who owes a debt to the bridge burners. He demands to know the secret symbols he will need for safe passage across the Odin, to which Mibra reluctantly tells him the only symbol he needs is that of the whirlwind. Kalam asks of all the other new symbols he has seen, and Mibra says they are meaningless, only to hide the whirlwind one from any Malazan observers. Before Kalam leaves, he notices Mibra has possession of the Holy Book of Drijna, which is destined to begin the rebellion once Shaik has it. Kalam says he will take the book to Shaik and Viraku in order to guarantee his own safe passage, and though Mibra would rather Kalam take him as a hostage rather than the book, he has no real choice but to tell him the signs he must leave to show other warriors of the apocalypse what he carries. Once Kalam has left, Commander Teen Baalta of the Red Blades emerges to congratulate Mibra on fooling Kalam, and says the Red Blades will follow Kalam all the way to Shaik and destroy her. Mibra suggests that they let Kalam live so he can torture him to extract information on his true intentions, as Mibra suspects that Kalam, a master assassin, is headed towards Mala's city. Panpotson Odin. Mappo and Icarium stand at the bottom of a cliff between Viraku and the Panpotson Odin, having spied a tower, almost unreachable in a fissure some way up it. Mappo is injured as they were attacked by divers leopards, who soon realized their mistake as Icarium killed them all. Mappo worried that Icarium might have gone too far, but was relieved when Icarium stopped keening and moved on, seemingly calm. Once they find the tower, they decide they will try to rest and gain supplies. Another Soltaken follows them, and Icarium readies for it to arrive while Mappo searches for an ascent. As Mappo returns, Icarium faces a massive plains bear, clearly reluctant to approach. The Soltaken sembles into his human form before approaching. Mappo knows him as Mesrem, and they greet each other as friends. Mesrem tells how they have become the bane of those who walk the Path of Hands, and Icarium expresses regret at this. Once he leaves, they return to look for a way up to the tower. Eventually a man riding a mule approaches along the cliff, and says he has been expecting them. He also falls off his mule, which disappears into a cave. Eventually, after much shouting, a servant appears carrying wine, and reveals that the man is Iskaro Pust, High Priest of Shadow. They wait a long time for a way to ascend to the tower, which is called Tezim, previously a temple of the Queen of Dreams. Many Bokarala gradually appear, and one of them lets down a rope from a window of the tower. The servant climbs up, before pulling up Iskaro Pust after him. Before the other two ascend also, Mappo notes that Pust is extremely powerful, and they should be careful. Icarium asks why he has blood on his sword, saying he recalls no fight, and Mappo lies by saying they were attacked in the night, and he borrowed Icarium's sword while he slept. Chapter 3. Skull Cup. Felicin is sleeping with Beneth, the leader of the slaves in Skull Cup, to procure better supplies and shifts for herself, Bodan and Heboric. Heboric in particular has been worked extremely hard, dragging up carts full of rocks from the deep mines, a job normally done by oxen. It seems that he is supposed to die quietly and unobtrusively. Heboric is angry at what she does, but she cannot tell what Bodan thinks, although he seems to protect her when Beneth is absent. As Beneth and Felicin walk through Skullcap, they meet Pella, a camp guard, who asks Beneth to talk to Captain Sark about the Dosii guards, who he believes will rebel if the mainland rises, because Beneth has the captain's ear as leader of the slaves. Pella then quotes from Diker's imperial campaigns, but Beneth and Felicin are not familiar with the work. The guard tells Felicin that they are worth learning and to find someone who might teach her. Felicin afterwards reassures Beneth that she has no interest in the flirting guard. Felicin's thoughts revolve around surviving each day as it comes, and she scorns Heboric's apparent hope to escape, but nevertheless takes note of the water level of the lake as he has asked her to do. The Otadro they mine is found only in limestone, which makes Heboric believe it is not a natural ore, but in fact created by magic, despite its magic negating properties. He is horrified at the thought of what might have created so much of it. When Felicin returns home, she bickers with Heboric, who curses Tavor for turning her teenage sister into an alcoholic whore. He also disapproves of her use of Durhang, and she retaliates by calling him a hypocrite. Both silently regret how what they say to each other seems much crueler than it is intended. They are in bed when Bodan comes in later and goes to have a whispered conversation with Heboric. Felicin, sure that they are planning something, is angry that she is excluded and even momentarily considers cutting herself loose from them for their lack of trust. She feels that only her efforts have kept the two men alive. Felicin feels abandoned and cries. His Tsar. Diker sits on Hisar's harbor wall, reflecting on the departure of Admiral Nock's fleet, which sailed to Aran on Pormquo's command. His only relief is that Malik Rel has left with them. Culp arrives and informs him that instructions have been sent to Heboric. An unscheduled boat docks, bringing Baria and Mesker Citral, two Red Blade commanders, along with their units. The Red Blades form up, about to attack the harbor market, but before panic sets in, 10 Wiccan warriors emerge from the crowd, to face the 40 Red Blades. Culp intervenes, but Baria threatens him, and Mesker announces that they intend to begin their stay in his Tsar with the blood of those Wiccans and that of traitors. Culp reasons that 5,000 Wiccans would take a painful, slow revenge. This, combined with the arrival of the His Tsar Guard and Wiccan bowmen, forces Baria and Mesker to back down. Diker notes how Colton, by hiding Wiccans in the market, has shown the citizens that he will defend them, and is well on the way to making an excellent reputation for himself. As they walk away, Culp explains to Diker how Colton has been training the 7th Army extremely hard in city fighting, controlling mobs and putting down insurrection, with Culp himself creating illusions of refugees. Diker says that the harder they push the army, the better prepared they will be when the worst does eventually happen. Culp mentions that Corporal List has died in every mock battle so far, but Diker points out that in a real battle, it can only happen once. He tells Culp to talk to the squad leaders and says he will talk to Colton to get them a day of rest if they can win their objective. The next day, Diker and Bolt, alongside a dead Corporal List, observe the day's mock battle. The 7th at last beat back the riding Wiccans and earn their day of rest. Erliton. Fiddler and Kalam had an argument about Kalam's insistence on taking the Book of Drigna to Shak. Despite that, Fiddler defends the assassin to Crocus, saying that triggering the rebellion will put more cracks in Lazine's control. While Kalam will travel overland and then by boat from Aran, the rest of them will find a new path to Unta which has probably never been used before but doesn't elaborate further. Crocus complains that they intend using Absailor in case Kalam fails to assassinate the Empress, since she was possessed by the Rope, patron of assassins, and still has some of his skills. Fiddler concedes that if not Kalam, Quick Ben would have considered the option. Fiddler asks why Moby, Mammoth's familiar, is still alive since Mammoth died, let alone traveling with them across half a whole continent, to which Crocus has no answer. He also tells Crocus that he has some growing up to do and Absailor can make decisions for herself. The next day they leave Erliton. Crocus and Absailor are posing as newlywed pilgrims, while Fiddler remains a growl, acting as their guardian. Kalam left the previous night on his own and Fiddler feels lost and alone after the argument which soured their parting. They both want Lazine gone but not the Empire, and Fiddler argued that the damage to the Empire might be so great that whoever replaced Lazine would have no chance of survival either. As they leave the city, a troop of Red Blades stop them and ask if they saw a man on a roan stallion leaving. Crocus is worried that they are after Kalam, but Fiddler ignores his concerns and moves off down the road. He wants to hurry, in order to reach Danispan, on the edge of the Panpotson Odin, in a week. He worries about Kimluck's conch shell, thinking it will be more trouble than it's worth, carrying an object of such potential power. Crocus notices that Moby has left, and is depressed, because he felt that through Moby, he was still connected to his uncle Mammoth. Tesm. Iskarl is hunting spiders in his tower. Mappa watches, amused, while he recovers from his injuries inflicted by the divers. He is worried in case poison has remained in his wounds and knows he will kill himself rather than let himself taken by the murderous rage it causes. He looks for Icarium and finds him in the library, which also serves as a kitchen, and where Servant is currently doing the laundry. Icarium is astonished at Iskarl's collection of books, which the priest himself had disparaged, noting that some of them are likely 1,000 years old, if not more, and must have cost a fortune, but that many are on relatively pointless subjects. Mappo is reminded by the script of a summoning in his past which led to a meeting with mysterious figures who wrote in the same archaic language as these books, a meeting which had changed Mappo's life forever. Icarium observes a twisted staff embossed into each book's spine, and thinks he has seen the symbol before. He thinks that the books prove that there was once a thriving and very rich civilization in 7 cities, and he is intrigued by it, as it reminds him of his own obsession with time, and how he makes mechanisms to measure and observe it. Mappo tries to divert Icarium and notes that he does not like staying too long in a temple of shadow, and fears getting trapped in some scheme of Pust, who does not fool him with his harmless act. Icarium says he feels he needs to stay at Tesm a while, however, and asks Mappo to be patient with him. The word returns Mappo to the memory he reflected on before, his meeting with the nameless ones who had asked him what he could learn of patience. He shakes off these thoughts, and they set off to explore the temple. Chapter 4. Skullcup. Felison is amongst slaves attending the retrieval of casualties after the collapse of part of the deep mine at Skullcup. She looks over to where Haboric is pulling a plow, already looking better. The thought that but for her arranging his transfer to lighter duties, he would have died, gives her no satisfaction. They hardly speak as she has become increasingly dependent on Durhang and Benetha's abusive behavior. As Felison reflects that she has made up her mind to move in with Beneth, the Malazan guard, Pella, approaches her, wanting to know if she has found the rest of Kellen's quote yet, the one he had told her about, but Felison does not remember. Pella realizes she is taking Durhang and notes that she looks 10 years older than last time they met, just 2 weeks ago. When she tells him he should ask Beneth for her, he ignores the implied offer and instead asks where Haboric is. Later, Beneth takes her to meet Captain Sark. She notices an undercurrent of disgust in Benetha's voice now, whenever he talks to her. Beneth tells Swark his concerns about a possible rebellion, but the captain isn't interested. Beneth offers him Felison in return for information on why Bodan was arrested that morning and is told that Bodan broke curfew the night before, initially escaped, but was later recognized and apprehended. Swark then takes a closer look at Felison and pales. Seeing this, Beneth rushes to offer him other girls and, asked about his connection to Bodan, assures the captain it is because he needs the man's strength on the workforce. Swark tells him Bodan won't be released and they leave, somewhat hurried. Out of sight, Beneth questions Felison about why Swark reacted the way he did, her connection to Bodan, and if she is noble-born. Felison lies, says she has no connection to Bodan and that she was a foundling, abandoned at the monastery of Fenrir on Malaz Island. Beneth doesn't believe her, hits her, and interrogates her further. When Felison shouts at him, he loses his temper and beats her systematically, then leaves. She loses consciousness. She wakes up in her own bed as Heboric is tending her wounds. He explains that Bodan has escaped, killing 3 men in the process, and Beneth has reported her missing, which prompted him to look for her. Felison says she wants to get back with Beneth, and that she needs some durhang. Heboric agrees to make her durhang tea. He compliments her on making up the story about being a foundling, as Beneth is none the wiser due to him, Heboric, being quick-witted enough to confirm her version. She does not understand why he wants to put her at ease that Beneth might take her back. Ladro Keep. Kalam is riding along the coastal road near the Estera Hills, when an approaching sandstorm forces him to leave the road. He notices a swarm of chigger fleas and stops to let them pass. Even though this means the storm catches up, it is the lesser of 2 evils. Keeping his horse to a slow walk, Kalam reaches the safety of Ladro Keep, a Malazan outpost he had wanted to avoid. Inside the common room are 4 guardsmen and a merchant with his wife. The sergeant is suspicious, so Kalam takes him to one side and shows him a pendant which the sergeant recognizes as that of a clomaster, and puts a stop to his questioning the assassin. The merchant's wife is a reader of the Deck of Dragons, but Kalam rebuffs her offer to read his future with contempt. 2 more travelers enter, a Pardo woman and an Early-Eye man, who obviously encountered the chigger fleas. The woman bickers with the sergeant about having to pay for beer and a cedar chip bath to clean off the chiggers, but eventually relents, even buying everyone a tankard. The merchant's wife starts reading the deck, but Kalam soon calls her out as a fake, as one of the cards she draws, Obelisk, is inactive in 7 cities. She angrily throws the deck at Kalam, and the cards form a pattern as they bounce off. The central card, Assassin of Shadow, is surrounded by all 6 members of the House of Death. Kalam thinks, Hood's house all arrayed around the one who carries the holy book of Drijna. Some time later, the Pardu, Red Blade Captain Lastara Yil, and her companion soldier, prepare to leave the keep, over an hour after their target. She regrets that they had to come so close to Kalam in their pursuit and reflects on the reading of the deck, which not only revealed Kalam's mission, but the guard sergeant's reaction showed him to be Kalam's co-conspirator. She confirms with her fellow Red Blade that they have managed to find and kill all the people in the keep, believing them all to be part of the rebellion. They then follow Kalam once more, hoping to get fresh horses in Intisarm, which should have been arranged for them by Teen Baralta. Tezim, Mappo and Icarium are exploring the octagonal crypt. They believe it was there long before the temple was dedicated to the Queen of Dreams, let alone Shadow, due to the difference in architecture. Paintings of trees on the walls with hints of beasts between them give the crypt the feel of a dark forest clearing. A pattern on the floor is obscured by graves pits cut into the ground, holding shrouded remains. Bacarala watch as the 2 men clear a blocked doorway but do not follow when Mappo and Icarium go through. Ahead is a large hallway, colonnaded with cedar tree columns. Icarium senses residues of magic and thinks they were brought in by the Elder Warren of Darkness, Curald Galine. Mappo is confused by this, as there is no mention of any Teast-Andii having ever been in 7 cities, but Icarium says it only has the feel of Galine. He cannot be certain, but it is none of the other Elder Warrens they know, i.e. Galine, Amtos Felak, Telan, or Starvald Demelaine. They reach another octagonal chamber. Intricately carved images on the octagonal flagstones of the raised floor are defaced by claw marks with the residue hint of Soltaken and divers. They conclude that the gate to the Path of Hands is in the room as well as more, and decide not to enter. Icarium points to a likeness in undamaged images and states that he feels close to comprehension, which fills Mappo with dread. They wonder if Iskropust is at the center of this convergence, and Mappo silently laments his curse that due to the nameless ones he is only able to offer silence and deceit in answer to Icarium's questions. Back upstairs, Mappo tells Pust that they have found the gate, but the priest ridicules them and charges them with finding his broom. Icarium tells the incongruous Mappo that in order to find every corner, they need to do just that. His Tsar, Diker, Culp and Bult attend a ritual conducted by Sormo and Nath in a dead oasis over an hour's ride to the northwest of his Tsar in the Odin. Sormo reveals that the oasis is a holy place, and that he is about to open himself to the sacred aspect of that place. Culp is worried because he thinks that the oasis is linked to the Seven, but Sormo interrupts that he thinks the closest aspect is Talan. The possibility of connecting with the undead clan en masse who have turned their back on serving the Empire since the Emperor's assassination worries Diker. The Wiccan warlock draws his power, daylight turns to dusk, it smells of marshland and the glade is ringed by trees. Diker wonders if the Empire made a grave mistake when they exterminated powerful warlocks like Sormo in the past. Sormo seems alarmed when the air grows alive with icy winds and a bestial stench. A cloud of wasps stings Bult, which Culp recognizes as divers. The wasps are joined by rats, fire ants and snakes, all attacking each other in the group. Culp unleashes his warren to defend them. An enormous midnight skin demon appears and attacks a bear as the glade is overrun with soultaken and divers. Diker realizes the demon is telling the group to escape as it creates a diversion. Culp manages to wake the spelled Sormo by punching him in the face, and the moment he wakes up, they find themselves back in the oasis. The warlock explains that something unexpected is happening, a convergence, the path of hands, the gate of the soul-taken and divers. The warren they found themselves in really was Talan. They wonder if there is a link between Elder Talan and shape-shifting, or whether the divers and soul-taken are simply passing through. Chapter 5. Danaspan. After waiting out the sandstorm in Traub, Fiddler, Crocus and Absailor arrive to find a renegade army outside Danaspan's walls. Having no option of avoiding them, they have to trust their disguises. Fiddler as a Growl tribesman sworn to protect Crocus and Absailor, as newly-wed young couple. A guard tells them that the city is closed and spits between the hooves of Fiddler horse. True to its Growl origins, the horse violently bites the guardsman, tearing off half his face. Fiddler hides his shock by cursing as a Growl would. The Iraq warriors that are stationed with the guards offer to buy Fiddler horse. He insults them but at the same time offers them his beer, thus acknowledging them as his equals and asks to camp with them for the night. The Iraqs race Fiddler to their camp. Fiddler horse wins the race by throwing a shoulder to the other horses. In the camp, the Iraq spokesman explains that Danaspan is closed because it has been liberated from the Mesla and there is going to be a cleansing. All the Malazan nobles and merchants are going to be executed this day. He admits that the Whirlwind Rebellion has not yet officially started, only they ran out of patience. When alone, Crocus and Absailor express doubt that their disguise will hold if they stay the night with the Iraqs. Fiddler suggests they enter Danaspan immediately, with the excuse of wanting to witness the flaying alive of the Malazans as a blessing for the young couple. Absailor says the instincts of the one who previously possessed her, who was used to giving orders when Fiddler was still a child, agree with the suggestion, and she all but orders Fiddler to do as she says. The Iraqs approach and announce the arrival of a Growl clan. Fiddler explains he cannot meet the clan because he is an outcast and moreover, the young couple want to enter the city without delay. The Iraq's attitude changes, they want to hold Fiddler for the clan's vengeance. Absailor saves the situation by claiming that she is with child and that she is going to curse the Iraqs if they don't let the three of them go. Free to go, they ride towards the city and Fiddler and Absailor discuss that his outcast story may yet endanger them as the Growl clan will surely pursue. Fiddler thinks to himself that he needs to stop himself falling in love with Absailor lest he might accidentally drop his guard over Crocus' life. In Danaspan, they find desolation everywhere, broken toys on the streets, dead bodies, smoke and screams of children dying. They see a naked and bruised young girl running and hiding and save her from her rapists by killing all 6 of them. The newlyweds ride on ahead whilst Fiddler deflects the questions of an arriving rebel troop in typical, show-off, Growl fashion. He catches up with the others just as they arrive in the city's central square where a massacre has taken place. There are hundreds of bodies, mainly old men, old women and children, all Malazan. Crocus asks if the Malazans did the same to the locals during the conquest, and Absailor vehemently states that the Emperor warred against armies, not civilians. When Fiddler mentions the Aran massacre, she asserts that it had been Surly's responsibility, the one now known as Lazine, not Kellent's. She goes as far as muttering that she should have killed her there and then. Fiddler and Crocus are astonished by this outburst, and her claims about the event. When Absailor then talks about having been in the room alone with Surly, arguing with her, they make the connection that the one who previously possessed her, the Rope, aka Cotillion, is in fact Dancer and that Shadow Throne is Kellent. Not murdered by Lazine as everybody believes, but escaped through ascendancy of the realm of Shadow and now wanting vengeance against Lazine, which is why Cotillion Dancer possessed Absailor when she was still a fisher's daughter. Absailor confirms all of this. Fiddler is upset that Dancer never revealed himself to his old comrades, Whiskey Jack, Kalam, Dijek, himself, and Absailor tells him that Dancer trusts no one, not even Kellent. They finally arrive to the south gate and ride out of the city where Crocus Familiar, Moby, rejoins them, visibly hurt and bleeding. They hear the sounds of pursuit from the Growl clan and decide to ride hard for the next village, New Velar. Raraku. Kalam arrives in Raraku where he meets Sha'ik's bodyguards, a 7-foot-tall Tablakai with a tattooed face, who initially attacks him, and Leoman, captain of Sha'ik's bodyguards. Once he has verified himself as the deliverer of the Book of the Apocalypse, Sha'ik, a small, honey-skinned woman, radiating power, appears, asking Kalam to give the book to her, which he does. She asks him to join her soldiers, but he refuses, saying that his destiny lies elsewhere. Sensing something about his intentions, she offers him an Aptorian demon as an escort on his journey through the desert. To the protests of the others she replies that they are safe as she has seen in multiple visions that the morning will see her renewed. Kalam departs in the company of the demon and thinks about what has just happened. He is beset by conflicting loyalties. As a child of the desert, he has seen to the rise of the whirlwind. Now he would kill the Empress in order to save the Empire. Should he fail, he might be pitting the two women, who are much alike, even in looks, against each other. Sha'ik sits cross-legged, flanked by her two bodyguards, just before dawn. As the first rays of light touch her, she opens the holy book and a quarrel hits her in the head, crushing her skull. Red blades under Teen Baralta attack the two bodyguards, but Leoman and Tablakai are too strong and cause casualties amongst the soldiers. Since Sha'ik is already dead, the commander recalls his troops. The two bodyguards don't pursue them. The red blades retreat to a small canyon, where Teen Baralta compliments Lastara Yil on her shot which killed Sha'ik, and orders her to regain Kalam's trail. Though hurt from being struck by the Tablakai's sword, Lastara follows the orders, knowing that the commander will hold the day's losses against her. Teen Baralta and his surviving red blades ride to Pampatsan. Leoman delicately rolls Sha'ik's body in a blanket and rewraps the book in a cloth. The two bodyguards are lost. Sha'ik opened the Book of the Apocalypse at dawn, as said in the prophecy, but nothing happened, except her assassination. They remember Sha'ik's words. At dawn I shall open the book, and the whirlwind shall rise, and I shall emerge from it. Renewed. So they decide to wait. Chapter 6. Otadero Mines. Felison is in Beulah's tavern with Beneth, who is full of uncertainty, rage and fear. He pushes a pouch of durhang towards her, and she takes it. Bodan has been missing for 6 days now despite patrols and a thorough search of the camp. Captain Sark has called Benethan more than once and Heboric has warned Felison that the two men likely shared what they know about her, and that Beneth is only taking her back to destroy her, this time on orders. Beneth tells her she could have said no and Felison agrees that the faults are all mine. After leaving Beulah's, they join Benetha's patrol squad and soon after find themselves under attack from Dosii guards who are rebelling against the Malazan rule. At the first sign of danger, the squad runs off. Beneth is struck down by the gauntlet hand of one of the rebels, shattering his nose, upon which Felison, who thinks Beneth dead, turns and runs away towards the barracks. About to be killed by rebels herself, she is rescued by a Malazan squad. Pella appears, explains that the Malazans are trying to crush the mutiny and assures her Beneth is still alive. He then takes her to Heboric's place where they also find Bodan. The two men are preparing to escape from the Otadero mines by swimming across Sinker Lake. There are caves on the other side, where Bodan has been hiding for the past days. Heboric offers to take Pella along, but the guard asks that they take Felisin instead. Felisin insists they take Beneth with them, and Bodan volunteers to find him. Alone with Heboric, Felisin suggests that they didn't want her to come along. She is convinced that the priest now despises her, because she has fallen so low. As they wait for Bodan by the lakeside, Heboric explains that their escape has been arranged by an old friend of his, Diker, the imperial historian. Supplies have been prepared to be left at the other end of an old mineshaft leading from the cave. They will then have to walk for 10 days across the desert to the inside coast, where a boat will pick them up and take them to the mainland. As they wait for Bodan, they are attacked by a swarm of blood flies. While the blood flies avoid Heboric because he is blessed by Fëanor, they savagely bite Felisin on her thighs, face, around her eyes, in her mouth and ears. Thanks to Heboric's special tincture, they manage to extract the larvae from the wounds, but Felisin will be scarred for life. Heboric promises her that he will find a high Denul healer to remove the pockmarks. Felisin feels that she has fallen at her lowest, as she doesn't even have vanity left to sting. Sark arrives with a troop and instead of stopping them, gives advice, apparently as a favor to Felisin, then rides off. Bodan arrives and tells them that Beneth is dead. Felisin feels pain and anguish at this announcement. She is convinced that Bodan didn't even look for him. She feels she has to go on nonetheless, so the trio swim across the lake as planned and get to the cave. Bodan goes scouting outside and sees Dasan Pali glowing with sorcery in the distance. Back in the cave, he tells Heboric and Felisin that the whirlwind has come. On the coast near his Sar. Diker and Culp have left his Sar and explore a fishing village on the coast in order to find a boat. They meet a group of Malazan Marines in the unusually quiet village inn, attached to the coastal guard, Corporal Jessler, who seems to have once held a higher rank, Marine Stormy, Recruit Truth, and a few sailors. The corporal accuses Culp of being a deserter. Before things turn ugly, they are interrupted by the arrival of a mob who attack the inn and also want to torch the Rypath, the boat of the Marines, which has been fully provisioned in anticipation of the need for a sudden withdrawal. Amongst the attackers is a mage, and Culp is drawn into a mage battle. Diker, having seen in the distance that his Sar is in flames, decides he has to get back to Colton. Stormy helps him get his horse out of the stable, and the historian sets out to rejoin the 7th. Culp and the Marines set off in the Rypath and eventually manage to escape the questing enemy mage. However, none of the sailors survive. With nowhere else to go, Culp decides to continue with the rescue of Heboric from the Otadero mines, his and Diker's original plan for the evening. The Marines are more than willing to cooperate once they find out that Heboric is a high priest of Fëanor. Chance has it that Jessler and Stormy were part of Boar Company of the disbanded First Army and are followers of the cult of Fëanor, and have even recruited Truth to it. Diker, pretending to be a Dosi tribesman, is riding towards his Sar and comes across a renegade army where he sees Malazan soldiers being tortured on sliding beds. He hears that his Sar has fallen to the rebels. Guilt about having taken Culp away just as he was needed and the scenes of torture swayed Diker from being a detached observer. He resolves to gather all the information he can which might be of use to a Malazan punitive force. When he gets to his Sar, Diker witnesses scenes of absolute horror, but it becomes evident that the Malazan forces were not totally wiped out, and Diker reconstructs what happened. Unable to prevent the first attack on the estate districts, the Wiccans must have sortied around the attackers, then killed them in an ambush. They then withdrew before the arrival of rebel reinforcements, taking many of the citizens with them. Before he is able to leave, Diker is conscripted into the rebel army. The commander informs him that the refugees from Sialk, which has also fallen to the rebels, will be driven to join Colton's train, adding to his burden. The rebel commander is Camistry Low, a renegade high mage, proving that contrary to Malazan belief, the rebellion is well organized. Tesm. Looking, ostensibly for Iskro Pus Sprum, Mappo and Icarium come across a chamber deep inside the temple, which has a fishing boat stored in it. Icarium estimates that it has been there, at the most, 5 years. They deduct that the boat and its owner were deposited there by Shadow, and it must have been servant to whom it belonged. They find the broom inside the boat. 3 hours later, they locate Pust in the library where he seems to have been waiting for them. The priest begins a reading of the deck of dragons and finishes with telling Icarium that he has to go on a quest, also hinting that Shadow Throne wants the message passed on. After a bit of hands-on persuasion by Icarium to speak plainly, the priest tells the Jag that he must go into the holy desert because Shak is dead. Mappo voices his doubts about the wisdom of witnessing the rebirth of the whirlwind goddess, not voicing his fear that doing so might awaken Icarium to the truth which has been hidden from him. Raraku, Fiddler, Crocus and Absailor, still pursued by their growl hunters, are faced by a wall of sand reaching up into the sky as they enter the holy desert, Raraku. Crocus is upset because Moby has disappeared again, and Fiddler reminisces silently about his previous encounter with the desert. Assuming that the sandstorm wall is a barrier, they venture forth to cross it. Within the storm, the landscape changes as layers of sand are being swept away to reveal traces of ancient habitation. Climbing up a steep bank, they come across a well-made, paved road which seems to run straight as a die from the northeast to the southwest, into the heart of Raraku. As Fiddler sees no point in going back the way they have come and considering Quick Ben's theory that Tremorler, the fabled gate and house of the Azath might be at the heart of Raraku, he decides that they should follow the road. When the Growl catch up with them moments later, Fiddler ends the pursuit by firing a cussor amongst them. The day after the whirlwind storm rolled out of Raraku, Kalam is skirting its edges, crossing the Anabaj Hills. He is still accompanied by the Aptorian demon which Shak gave him but doesn't trust the creature. Abruptly, Kalam finds himself outside the storm, looking back at a wall of sand. They are attacked by divers but manage to defeat the wolves. The Aptorian, called Ap for short by Kalam, is wounded in the attack but refuses Kalam's offer of cleaning the wound. There is something odd about the demon, but Kalam can't figure out what it is. Chapter 7. In Land of Syalk. Diker and a sergeant of the rebels observe the aftermath of a battle between Colton's Malazans and the army of the Whirlwind near the village of Badrol. Though they have suffered a defeat, the rebels are gaining strength and pursuing the 7th Army. A scout brings news that Camus Relo lives and a high mage with a new army is joining them from the north. Diker leaves the rebels and follows the trail left by Colton's army and the refugees, southwards into the Syalk Odin. He ponders Colton's options and is concerned he himself might not survive long enough to rejoin the Malazans. Diker notices horsemen ahead, riding hard, which he guesses to be Tithan horse warriors on their way towards Dryj Spring where he expects Colton to be heading as well. He notices a cloud of Cape moths behind him and shrugs off the impression that there might be a face in that cloud. Near Skullcup. It has been 6 days since their escape from Skullcup. Heboric has gone to observe a mass of beetles which has risen from the floor of the basin ahead just as he, Felisin, Bodan are about to set off for another night's travel west. Felisin is still recovering from the blood fly bites. Even though the swelling has decreased, she feels it has left a sense of rot which is poisoning her soul. They circumnavigate the beetles and some time later come across a large, green monolith, made of jade, which Heboric claims to be a finger. Otadral dust from a storm pollutes the air, which makes Heboric eager to seek the cover of their tents. The 3 travelers keep antagonizing each other. As they rise to continue their journey, Felisin notices that one of Heboric's stumps has become infected where it touched the monolith. She wonders if Heboric is going to live much longer. When Heboric lags behind, Bodan goes looking for him and Felisin takes the opportunity to rifle through Bodan's pack where she finds many curious items, assassin's weapons mostly, as well as what looks to be the talon of a large cat. Bodan returns with Heboric, who is covered in tattoos everywhere apart from the swollen stump. Annoyed by her, Bodan informs Felisin that Beneth used to laugh at her efforts on behalf of them. She refuses to believe him and declares that her dreams have told her that she will be the only one to live through their journey. The following night, by now desperately in need of water, they come across a spring only to find it fouled. Heboric seems to be dying, so Bodan, using the priest's tattoos, attempts to open the warren of Finner. This results in drawing the boar god physically into the mortal world, leaving him vulnerable. Heboric regains consciousness and is much improved. He wonders about the impact of the god's arrival on the deck of dragons, and feels the irritation of ghost hands on the ends of his stumps for the first time in years. They continue their journey, and Heboric claims he smells water and tells Felison that when they are at the coast she will find that nothing has changed. Bodan shouts in surprise. Tesm. Mappo thinks back to his tribe days when he was singled out for a task by the Nameless Ones. Icarium confesses his curiosity over Mappo's memories. They discuss Shark's presumed death and the whirlwind prophecies. Both feel that they are being manipulated. Raraku, Fiddler, Crocus and Absailor are still on the ancient road on their ever-tiring horses. For the last 10 hours they have been hearing sounds of inhuman fighting behind the cloud of sand to their right. Fiddler is weary from holding his crossbow at the ready. When Crocus' horse collapses, they have no option but to stop. They brace themselves for battle, realizing the fight they hear is between divers and soul-taken. 3 growl hunters catch up and charge towards them. One is attacked by a soul-taken in the form of a bear, and the rest, including a 4th growl hunter, previously not seen, are defeated by Absailor in quick succession. Fiddler, who is watching Absailor, is attacked and injured by something non-human. A diver called Grillin comes upon them, but Icarium and Mappo appear and vow to protect Fiddler, Crocus and Absailor, making Grillin retreat. Chapter 8. Near Dryj Spring. Diker hears from fleeing Tythansi tribesmen that Colton left the refugees to take on water at Dryj Spring and led his Wiccan horse warriors in the Odin over a league from the oasis to ambush the Tythansi. Though the Wiccans had been outnumbered 7-1, they slaughtered the tribesmen who are beginning to see them as something more than human. Diker contemplates that even though Camus Relo's army has superior numbers, Colton's Wiccan army will pose a strong threat to them. Fearing friendly fire from the bloodthirsty Wiccans, he makes for the oasis instead but finds it pillaged and the refugees already gone. He decides to take a break from his tiring journey at the spring. At dusk, he continues on the trail. Coast of Otadral Island. Felison, Heboric and Bodan reach the coast and are waiting for Diker to come and rescue them by boat. Felison seduces Bodan to give her the opportunity to kill him as they sleep together. Bodan foils the attack and makes it clear that he was well aware of her intentions. As the trio keep waiting, they see a wave of raging sorcery racing across the water towards them. Heboric moves protectively in front of Felison and the approaching wall shatters around him, but the priest puts it down to the Otadral of the island. As the sorcery fades, they see a boat approaching them and a man, a mage, asking them for help. The boat is the Rypath with Culp, Jessler, Stormy and Truth. On its way to Otadral Island they had been attacked by this sorcery, which Culp supposed came from a mage rendered insane by exposure to Otadral, losing control over his warren which had then taken control of him. Culp had struggled to protect the boat as they had sailed alongside the shore, and thus had been relieved when he had sensed a power onshore which had seemed to be pushing back the sorcery. Finding a break in the reef they had made a dash for it. Culp tells Heboric that they separated from Diker north of his Tsar due to the apocalypse. Observing the priest with his warren, he senses a battle taking place within Heboric between Otadral, Funner's warren and an alien power. When the 3 Marines tell Heboric that they are of the Boar cult, he rejects them. Culp and the priest discuss their companions and Heboric's afflictions. Culp tells Jessler that Heboric and the Otadral in him will help them get off the island and fight off the mad wizard. Heboric hears Felison talk about a talon amongst Bodan's possessions. His surprised reaction and subsequent cryptic exchange with Bodan indicate to Felison that the 2 men are now sharing a secret. She distracts herself with thoughts of revenge, then tries to seduce Jessler to get him on her side but fails. Felison seeks solitude and ponders why she can't help herself from lashing out at people. Sometime later, at night aboard the Rypath, they go through the gap in the reef and enter a spinning vortex, instantly coming under attack from the sorcery of the insane mage. They see a tiny figure riding the storm high above, and Culp, who is battling the chaotic sorcery, realizes that they are within the madman's warren. The tiny figure falls as it is engulfed by a wave, and the Rypath slumps forward into dead calm. Heboric uses his Finnerghost hand to heal Stormy's thigh injury, sustained during the attack. Bodan, also injured, refuses Haboric's healing. A strange pale blue thick water is slowly filling the ship's hold. They abandon the gradually sinking right path and swim to a seemingly abandoned ship nearby, which Bodan claims is a pre-imperial Quan Draman. When they study the abandoned ship, Bodan, seeing cargo from drift of Alii, concludes that it is the Salanda, which was the only ship sanctioned to trade with the Teast Andii, and which failed to return to Quan after it was overthrown by the Emperor. Investigating the ship, they find dozens of bundles containing mostly cleanly severed heads of Teast Andii, and some of humans. Culp and Gessler head down the hatch which leads to the ore pit, where they find headless corpses manning the oars. They conclude that someone, a long time ago, took the ship, beheaded everyone and put them to work. They find more bodies, of a different race, in the captain's cabin, one pinned to the chair by a spear which could be barghast if not for its size. They deduce these must have been the ones who killed the crew. Haboric believes them to be Teast Eater. Culp takes the captain's whistle and gives it to Gessler. Truth spots sails from the crow's nest. The insane mage has followed them. Gessler decides that running is their only option and blows the whistle. Salanda lurches into motion, operated by the now animate corpses below deck. Culp mentions to Haboric that he is worried about the latter's healing touch on Stormy, although the man is not showing any adverse reaction. As the insane mage's storm slowly catches up to them, Felicin contemplates all the magic she has experienced. She has become inured to upheavals and feels that little would shock her now. Truth appears, and she replies to his comment that the sorcerer is in the clouds with sarcasm. This leads to her and Bodan having another spat. Tesm. Fiddler wakes up at the Temple of Shadow where he finds himself tended by Iskaropust. The high priest alludes to bargains, arrangements and the deck as he is seemingly talking to himself. Mappo appears and explains the local situation, as well as that Fiddler friends are with Icarium, but the Trell avoids talking further about the Jag. Pust admits to them that the Rope and Shadow Throne have no more interest in possessing Absailor because of Rake's warning among other things. Absailor and Crocus are told by Fiddler that they are looking to find Tremorler, which is a house of the Azath like the one which grew in Duruhistan. Quick Ben believes that these houses are connected to one another, and there is one such house in Malaz City, called the Deadhouse, hopefully enabling them to travel almost instantaneously to Malaz City. Iskaropust delivers a cryptic message, then vanishes, and the others all decide that they should leave. Chapter 9. Warbala Odin. Kalam comes across the aftermath of the uprising. It is 5 days since APT's battle against the divers. The demon has recovered from the fight and keeps following Kalam. Kalam comes across a camp of bandits claiming to be fighting for the uprising. He is told of Colton and his refugees. Kalam reluctantly agrees to join the bandits to attack a vulnerable camp of Malazan refugees. As the bandits ride towards the Malaz camp, Bordu, their leader suggests Kalam and he attack from the other side. After they have broken away, Kalam slits Bordu's throat. Kalam then joins the Malazans who have turned the camp into a trap for the bandits. Together they kill the remaining raiders. The Malazans tell Kalam that they were part of a whole company which left Orbal, escorting out refugees. They came across an army and they are the only ones left, they being the Captain Kaneb and his family and his sister-in-law, Minala. Kalam introduces himself, and tells them that he plans to go to Aran and join the Malazan ranks again. Kalam and Minala plan to attack the remaining bandit, who is guarding food, water and horses as they are in need of all three. When they get there, they find that 7 other bandits have joined the guard. Kalam successfully takes down all 8 bandits. 2 other dead bandits are also found, likely killed by apartment. Kalam is told that Corbulo Dam, who used to be a fist of the Malazan army, is leading an army of the whirlwind. He thinks that Minala is showing interest in him, which he decides to ignore. They ride out of the riverbed onto the Odin. The Salanda, Curel de Merlin Warren. A wave deposits mud on the deck of the Salanda, which changes shape to reveal 6 Tlan Amass, their leader, Hentos Ialam. They say that they are looking for their renegade kin and the Teast Eater. They also reveal that the Warren is an elder Warren, Curel de Merlin. Hentos Ialam touches Haboric and claims that his god still makes use of him. Hento's ILM kills the insane mage, thus stopping the storm, but the warren is left with a wound which needs a soul to be healed. The clanless Legana breed gives his sword to Stormy and collapses into dirt, then spirals towards the sky, subsequently bridging the wound. The rest of the clan en masse leave before anyone can ask them for a way out of the warren. Truth asks if anyone else has seen the clan en masse carrying one of the severed heads. Culp runs down to the oars deck and informs everyone that one of the bodies is now dead. Chapter 10. Sekala River. It's been 3 months that Diker has been following Colton's army, and he realizes that Colton is preparing to cross the river Sekala. So he makes a dash through rebel army camps to at last reach Colton's camp. There he is taken to a briefing with Colton, his captains and warlocks. Colton sets plans for the crossing of the river. The nobles want preferential treatment, and have objections about Colton's plans, which Colton ignores. The nobles are then thrown out of the meeting. Once the meeting is over and most have been dismissed, Colton asks Diker about Culp, and Sormo informs Diker that warrens are not so useful because of soul taken and divers infesting them. This is advantageous for the Malazans because Camus Rilo has no knowledge of the older ways, which Sormo is able to turn to. After he is woken by Corporal List, Diker warns Baria Citral of the Red Blades that he knows that Semp tribes have joined Rilo's army. The crossing continues and the battle begins. Diker and List make their way to a wall so that they can observe the battle better. They meet the young warlock Nether, who goes to face the Semp sorcerers. They observe another young warlock, Nil, raising ancient zombie soldiers. Nil informs Diker about Wiccan clan wars in the past which are mirrored by the zombie soldiers. The battle rages more fiercely as the Malazans are driven back to the river. Diker is sure there have been mass drownings and they'll all be killed due to the river holding them up. But the sappers have built a road across the river using the wagons, and so the Malazans are able to cross swiftly and easily. One of the engineers, Cuddle, then blows the road with Rilo's peasant army vanguard still on it, leaving a trench and trapping Rilo's army on the one side of the river, leaving one army left to fight on the other side, the Semp, who eventually retreat. Colton holds another meeting, where many losses are recounted. Diker is told about the Semp god, which is a cruel ascendant. They also discuss that Abarid has fallen, thus their only option is to go all the way to Aran. Nether awakens Diker in the middle of the night and takes him to Sormo, who shows him a cliff of ice with the Semp god's body in it, which was trapped by Jaghut's sorcery. Sormo tells Diker that he offered the flesh and thus the power of the Semp ascendant to the land's spirits. He then releases the ascendant from the ice, who is torn apart by the spirits. Nethpera, Tumlet and Lenestro come to Diker with a complaint that Colton has taken their servants away. Chapter 11. Felison, Heboric and Co. on board Salanda, Curil de Merlin Warren. Culp mentally accesses the Miana's Warren in an attempt to find a way out of the Curil de Merlin Warren but is unsuccessful. Soon after, a very large, undead soul-taken dragon flies between the Salanda and the Rent. Sensing that Culp was trying to seal the Rent, the dragon psychically takes hold of Culp, making him hover above the deck and casting him in blue flame. Other ascendants take notice and also inhabit Culp. This action seals the Rent and Culp is freed. The dragon flies off and the Salanda is steered to ride its wake. The dragon then opens a warren that is engulfed in fire. Bodan picks up Felison and jumps overboard as the Salanda and its inhabitants burn. They land in desert sand. Bodan has been burned all over, but is otherwise uninjured. He tells Felison that he has been changed somehow. They begin walking through the desert and come across Heboric and Culp. Culp is unconscious and Heboric says he hit his head going over the side of the Salanda. Heboric informs them all that they are on the mainland of 7 cities. Culp awakens and leads them through the desert. Culp demands to know why Bodan is acting as bodyguard to Felison, and Heboric lets slip that Bodan is a Talon, sent by Tavor to protect Felison. He goes on to explain that the Talons were created by Dancer, and when Lazine, who was at the time surly, became regent, she sent the claws to kill all of the Talons. Bodan explains that only a few are left, living in secret, and they are either really old or sons that inherited the secret. He also affirms that Felison was never supposed to stay in Skullcup. By adding her to the cull, Tavor was showing her loyalty, as well as House Perron's loyalty to Lazine. This is also why she used a talon instead of a claw to protect her. She didn't want it to get back to the Empress. Felison's own actions at Skull Cup kept Bodan from getting her out. Felison tells Bodan to leave, that she would try to kill him every chance she could. He does, which angers Haboric and Culp. They decide, however, to stay with Felison instead of following Bodan because Haboric is indebted to her, and Culp is there to help Haboric. They see the whirlwind coming at them through the desert, and Culp realizes they are in Varaka. They run towards some hills as the sandstorm engulfs them. Fiddler, Crocus, Absailor, Mappo, Icarium, and Pust in Pust's Temple of Shadows. Iscarol Pust delaying their departure gives Fiddler and Mappo time to talk. They wonder if Pust is scheming to use Absailor to fulfill the prophecy of Shah Ikerborn. Mappo surmises that Pust is involved with the Path of Hands and the convergence of the Soul-Taken and Divers. He tells Fiddler about the chamber beneath the temple where he and Icarium found the carvings of the Elder Deck. He says that he believes the account of the creation of the shapeshifters could be found there, and that the shapeshifters are after that knowledge, hoping it will allow them to ascend and become the god of the shapeshifters. He believes that is where the end of the Path of Hands lie, and that Pust has been trying to throw them off the trail by laying false markings in the desert. Fiddler and Mappo concede that Pust has been keeping Mappo and Icarium around to help fight the shapeshifters off if needed. Fiddler wonders about the tales of horror he has heard about Icarium and finds them in contrast to the person he has come to know. When they rejoin the group, they find Crocus, having become aware of Pust's plans for Absailor, choking the life out of Pust, claiming he deserves it. Fiddler and Absailor remind him that shadows are gathering and convince him to let go. Absailor says that she will not be used by an ascendant again. Pust says that she wouldn't, that she would be a leader. Absailor leaves the room upset. The rest of the group work it out that Servant is actually Absailor's father. Later, Icarium finds Mappo and tells him that Absailor has left, following after her father. They collect their gear to set out after her. Icarium tells Mappo that he believes he is close to finding out about his past, and that Mappo knows more than he has said. Fiddler, Crocus, Mappo, and Icarium set out after her, leaving Pust and the Bokarala behind. Kalam, Minala and company in the Odin. Kalam finds Korbalodam's army camped along the south edge of the plain. Seeing no way around with the group, he takes the enchanted stone that Quick Ben gave him, the one he was to use to get close to the Empress. He doesn't know what it will do but thinks that it will help them get past the army of the Apocalypse. Shattering the stone against the rock, the group is thrust into the Imperial Warren. This is much to Kalam's dismay because he knows it will be dangerous in the Warren. Kalam tells them that he will use the Warren to try and take them to Aran. Lastara Yil, on Kalam's trail. Lastara comes upon the open Warren and meets Pearl as he exits it accidentally. He tells her that he is a claw and that he knows her to be a red blade. Pearl decides to join Lastara as they head into the Warren after Kalam. Apt, staying close to Kalam but out of sight. Korbalodam's army crucified 1,300 children on X-shaped crosses. Apt steals them and takes them to Shadowthrone, putting the army of the Apocalypse in panic, as no one saw the bodies being removed. Apt convinces Shadowthrone that he can use them as an undead army. Apt also convinces Shadowthrone to give her one child, who had had his eyes gouged out, as a companion who would ride her. The demon also convinces Shadowthrone to give the child an eye to match the one she has. Shadowthrone sends the pair off to trail Lastara and Pearl as they follow Kalam. Chapter 12. Samentel. 9 days east of the river Patha, Diker looks over Colton's chain of dogs as it continues to march westward. They are tired, dusty, and dying of thirst. The column is laid as this from front to rear. 1. Colton and 1,000 riders of the Crow clan at the vanguard. 2. Wagons of seriously wounded and their caretakers. 3. Almost 1,000 members of the 7th that are considered walking. 4. Wounded. 4. Malazan nobles with carriages and wagons flanked on either side by 10 companies of the 7th Infantry. 5. 200 riders comprising the 7th surviving attachment of medium-equipped cavalry. 6. The nearly 50,000 refugees and livestock, flanked on each side by a column of loyal Hizsari infantry and marines. 7. A south-facing guard comprised of 5 companies of the 7th, numbering almost 1,000, and 2 250-man patrols of Foolish Dog and other Wiccans. Diker and Corporal List accompanying. 8. A north-facing guard comprised of 5 companies of the 7th, numbering almost 1,000, and 2 250-man Wiccan patrols. 9. A rearguard 2/3 of a league behind the others of 1,000 riders from each Wiccan clan, broken up into units of 12 or less. Tythansi raiders are constantly skirmishing with the Wiccan rearguard, attacking the tail end of the column. They are under the leadership of a new and nameless commander within Camus Relo's army of the Apocalypse. Diker contemplates the horror of the camp at night and the sounds of suffering livestock being slaughtered. He witnesses a baby dying in its mother's arms, and overhears a rumor that the nobles are kidnapping and eating babies at night. Captain Lull tells Diker that they are going to sneak out that night and assassinate the Tythansi war leader that has been harassing their flank. Diker is advised that he has been volunteered. As they head out that night, Diker reminisces on how Emperor Kelland made him historian. He was an illiterate soldier at the time, and the Emperor had him pulled from the ranks to have him taught by Tok the Elder. Also being taught was the young boy, Tok the Younger, who soon helped in Diker's education. The group is made up of Diker, Lull, 4 of Lull's Marines, Nil, another young warlock, and 3 squads of sappers. The sappers set off explosions to the northeast as a diversion, while the others use a warlock-generated fog and waterlogged tunnel to approach their target unobserved. At a small Tythansi camp they find several Tythansi soldiers as well as the Tythansi war leader and a Semp tribesman. The Marines shoot at them with their crossbows, killing 2 of the Tythansi soldiers and their war leader. An earth spirit conjured by a warlock attacks the others. The Semp tribesman seems impervious to their attacks and begins tearing the earth spirit apart. Nil falls into a catatonic state, while the other young warlock is torn to pieces by sorceress powers. Diker comes to the sickening realization that the Semp is possessed by the Semp tribal god, and that it is the true war leader. One of the female Marines carries the unconscious Nil to safety while Diker accompanies her, fighting off Tythansi attacks. He is unexpectedly competent, and a spark of attraction develops between the 2 soldiers. After crossing back over the picket line, a squad of sappers tells Diker that even though they exploded 2 sharpers on the Semp, he just got back up. Nil is placed on a travois pulled by the Wiccan cattle dog Bent and sent to the healers. Diker informs Lull that a claw was present during the fighting as he noticed several Tythansi bodies embedded with the assassin's trademark throwing stars and knives. Later, at a council of the army's leaders, Sormo explains that a piece of the Semp god must have survived and been ingested and sealed within the Semp tribesmen. Colton is rattled by Diker's claims of a claw presence among them. Diker also advises Colton and the other leaders of the water that was found in the Warlock Tunnel just below the land's surface, ending the army's thirst. By dawn the camp is rejoicing as water is retrieved from pits dug throughout the camp. Raraku, Kulp, Heboric, and Felison have been denied shelter in the Raraku desert for 3 days by the raging whirlwind. They lack food and water, and Heboric is weakened by fever. Kulp finds some caves newly sculpted into a mesa by the blowing sand and informs his companions. Inside they are protected from the winds and they stumble upon outcroppings and pillars of crystalline minerals. Cover Deadhouse Gates by Mark Simonetti Felison, Kulp and Heboric finding the ruins by Mark Simonetti. Kulp scouts ahead and finds a large cavern heaped with stones too regular in shape to be natural. A large hole fills the ceiling, and opening his warren, Kulp feels no sorcery. He informs Felison that the hill is a buried city. The trio use Kulp's leather band and rain cloak in an attempt to climb a quartzite column to reach the hole without success. In the end, Heboric uses his phantom hands to launch Kulp with supernatural strength upward through the hole from where he can pull the others along. In this room, steps rise to a door leading to another room filled with hundreds of elderly human sculptures sprawled on the floor. Kulp warns Felison not to touch the finely detailed and lifelike lime statues as he senses sorcery. Heboric, his eyes blistered shut by the sandstorm, claims they are in the ruins of a city of the First Empire. granted insight by his altered state, the priest says a gate had once been opened by the elders in this room in an attempt to give the path of the soul taken to their children as an alternative to ascendancy. The sculptures were once alive, their current condition a consequence of alchemies that slowed aging and exposure to floods of mineral-rich water. Following a tunnel, they come to a street with low residential buildings along its sides. More bodies are found, this time soul taken and divers in the act of veering into something reptilian. Heboric explains that the ritual ran wild, claiming unready thousands and driving them into a killing madness. The discovery of a dismembered clan en masse leads Heboric to explain the kinship between the immortal undead warriors and the shapeshifters. These clan en masse came to set right the abomination of the opened gate. They soon find a pool of water in the center of a still-living garden. According to Heboric, the alchemies of the water will provide some benefit to them, as it has the garden whose fruits have endured for 9,000 years. Imperial Warren Kalam, Minala, and Kaneb and his family continued their trek through the Imperial Warren. Amidst the endless plain of ash and ruin, Minala fears they are lost and demands Kalam get them out. Kalam answers, not yet, as he struggles to find an opening to Aran. Something is blocking his attempts. Minala sees clouds ahead which tells Kalam that they have company. Smelling wood spice, Kalam's unease grows and he brings his crossbow out. They come to a pit whose strata of bone, ash, and ruined stone reveal a history of the fires that had once incinerated this land. At the bottom, Kalam sees a ruined mechanism that reminds him of the circle of seasons created by Icarium in Daruhustan. Kaneb remarks that a seer visiting the Orbal garrison had performed a reading from the deck of dragons that revealed Icarium was then present within the Pampats and Odin. The group continues south along a sunken road before making camp. Kalam has determined that the soul-taken and divers sharing the warren are all heading northward. Kaneb sits with Kalam to explain the tension amongst the group. He reveals that Minala had been unhappily married to Colonel Traz back at the garrison. Unknown to Kaneb or Selv, Traz had regularly beaten Minala before having the garrison healer remove evidence of her injuries. During the confusion of the Whirlwind Rebellion, someone had brought the colonel to a deserved end. Now Minala has wrapped herself about the family like armor, while Kalam has attempted the same with Minala and the rest. Kalam understands that Minala recognizes the assassin holds daggers unseen. Raraku, Fiddler, Crocus, Icarium, Mappo, and Iskril Pust attempt to follow the trail of Apsalar and Servant through the shrieking winds of Sandstorm. Only the presence of the Jag protects them from being attacked by the soul-taken and divers moving through the area following the path of hands. The same cannot be said for the desert warriors whom Fiddler, scouting their flank, sees consumed by a pack of giant spiders. The group comes upon the body of a soul-taken whose wounds bear the sign of Apsalar's passage. Mappo determines they are no more than an hour behind their quarry. Fiddler determines to stay close to the others and ponders whether Apsalar's father is a willing participant in the chase. Imperial Warren and Saman tell. Pearl informs Lastara Yield that they must temporarily abandon their pursuit of Kalam. The Empress has called and Pearl is the last surviving operative, in 7 cities. He also reveals that they are being tracked. He believes Kalam lacks discipline because of how long Kalam has been traveling in the Warren without yet reaching Aran. He believes Kalam is not focusing, and this is embarrassing for one so weighty. Thus, he is disappointed in the man. Pearl readies his throwing stars and knives before opening a portal near to where Colton's army crosses the desert. He and Lastara are to aid Colton without allowing the fist's edge to be dulled, and Pearl warns Lastara to avoid a Semp demon. The pair soon find themselves within a skirmish amidst an unnatural fog, and Pearl begins killing Tythansi warriors. Suddenly, the Semp godling appears, killing Lastara's horse and tossing the 2 companions to the ground. The 2 are saved by the appearance of an Aptorian demon with a child riding its back. The Aptorian plunges its arm into the Semp's belly, tearing out a mass of flesh that radiates power. It tosses the object into the mists, and the Semp stumbles after it. Pearl thanks the Aptorian before summoning a portal to whisk him and Lastara to safety. Chapter 13. Near the River Patha. The chain of dogs are one day east of the River Patha. As Diker walks through camp, he is startled by an onrushing Wiccan cattle dog bearing a frightened lapdog in its mouth. The dog races past, and the historian is soon accosted by a group of nobles looking for their rare Hengese roach dog. Diker does not treat the issue with the gravity they think it deserves, and one noble, Pulik Aller, begins to threaten him with a beating. They are interrupted by Corporal List, who has been sent to bring Diker before Colton. Along the way, they spot the noble Lenestro beating the servant who lost the dog. Diker stops the beating, and asks List to bring the man to the army's healers. He informs the noble that the servant will not be returned to him and frightens the man into a faint by shaking him by the collar. They are berated by an indignant Nethpera until List advises the noble of Diker's background as a soldier. In his mind, the historian used restraint by not stabbing Lenestro to death. Arriving at the wagons bearing the dying and the wounded, Diker says they are a lesson that lays bare the delusion of self-importance. They leave the servant to the hands of the healers. They reach Colton's headquarters, where Diker is greeted by his unnamed marine before stepping inside the tent. List grins at the old man's sudden improved mood. Inside are the Fist, Bolt, Captain Lull, and Sormo Anath. The necromancer explains that the Semp godling was badly damaged the night of the attempted assassination. Apparently Diker's reported claw had assistance from a demon. But Sormo is puzzled. During the attack, Nil entered a spirit world where he came face to face with a young boy who appeared to be the beast's familiar. This is not typical of an Imperial demon. Bolt informs Diker that Camus Relo has prepared them a welcome on the other side of the river. Since the army cannot go around, they will go through. Diker will accompany the Marines. Lull clarifies that they will not be on the front lines. Diker tells Colton that he does not believe it was a good idea to return the nobleman's servants, and Colton decides to bring the servants into the army. Later, Colton sits beside Diker, and they discuss the upcoming battle. The army does not know conditions ahead as the scouts are being hunted. Colton is still aware of the large forces awaiting them. Diker is pessimistic about their chances, but Colton assures him that they will be victorious. Diker stands and makes his way to nearby Foolish Dog Wiccans. He realizes they are turning themselves into a heavy cavalry unit. Despite Timmel's demonstrations, Diker doubts the potential efficacy of the force, and he heads off to the 7th Army camp. He meets Lull and List, who tell him they will be at the back of the attacking forces. Chind and Sulmer arrive, claiming that the sappers of the 7th have deserted. Lull has doubts, but before the conversation can continue, final preparations before the battle begin. Gelia Ridge. With assembly of the forces complete, Diker and the unnamed Marine begin to advance towards the lake bed where the battle will occur. Vastly outnumbered, the forces cross the river. As the troops begin their ascent, enemy arrow fire starts to hit them. Bolt temporarily clears the archers, and the first of the Marines make contact with enemy forces at the ridge's top. Diker watches enemy forces approaching the 7th from all sides. In the distance, Diker notes that the Wiccans guarding the refugees are in battle. As the 7th's formation begins to crumple, Nil and Nether come forwards leading a horse, and the heavily armored Foolish Dog clan prepare to charge. The sappers appear from hiding, and their munitions generate chaos in the heavy forces. The Foolish Dog begin their charge. The sappers fall to the ground as the charge goes over them. Their shields mostly protected them. Diker steps to the side to observe the battlefield. He turns and sees the Weasel clan's attack on remaining forces in the valley. This decisively turns the tide of the battle. Lull returns, his face seriously wounded by a mace. The battle complete, Diker is shocked by the casualties. Hundreds of refugees were killed in a trap laid by the Weasel clan that nearly eliminated the Titan. Diker recounts the horse which Nil and Nether had their hands on. Its life force was used to fuel the uphill Wiccan charge. Arin. In the Imperial Warren, Kalam gets off his horse and approaches a half-buried dome with a carved symbol he recognizes. His reminiscing is cut short by Manala's approach, and Kalam decides it is time for the party to leave the Warren. Concentrating, he opens a portal and they step into an abandoned necropolis in the Arin. They head to Squall Inn, where Kalam sits down in the main room opposite another solitary man. The rest of his group head into a private room. Kalam and the man strike up a conversation, and after some discussion the man offers Kalam passage to Unta on the rag stopper, which also happens to be carrying the Aran treasury. The man says the arrangement was made by a man named Sok Elan. Kalam decides to part ways with Minala and the rest of his party. Minala is angered by the sudden departure. Despite Kalam's misgivings, he begins to travel towards the harbor with the man, captain of the rag stopper. Lastara, Yil, and Pearl are discussing the tracking of Kalam when she decides she ought to report to the local Red Blades commander. She enters the streets, and city troops quickly find her. She is disarmed and the soldiers detain her after informing her the Red Blades have been arrested. A confused Kaneb comes upon Minala packing up her gear. She informs him that Kalam has left, and she will be following him. Chapter 14. Raraku. Felisin Paran, Haboric Light Touch, and Kulp are in the buried First Empire city in Raraku. Kulp warns that living Sultakan and divers are in the city and that they must escape. Haboric offers to lead them out of the ruins. He leads them through the city ruins and into a temple, a tunnel in the back providing an exit onto the mesa cliffs. Kulp and Felisin tie themselves to his back, and he uses his invisible hands to climb down the cliff and to the ground. They begin to run away from the shapeshifters of the city, but suddenly enter a sphere of calm and meet the merchant Nawal Eber. He promises them safety and the three travelers begin to relax, but after some time a soul-taken bear begins to attack the sphere. As they watch the bear, Eber reveals himself as the diver's Grillin, turning into a swarm of rats and killing Kulp. Bodan abruptly reappears and begins to attack the rats. Felisin and Haboric escape as the bear, Mesrem, breaks the barrier and attacks the rats along with Bodan. Felisin and Haboric escape but before long, succumb to exhaustion and fall asleep. Upon awakening, Felisin finds a terribly burnt Bodan approaching. He dies in her arms, breaking the metaphorical walls she has built around herself. Mappo, Fiddler, Crocus, and Icarium continue in their pursuit of Apsalar and her father. They discuss the possibility that Apsalar might be considering taking on the role of Shaik, or even that she might again be possessed by Cotillion but can only follow to wherever it is she is leading them. Leoman and Tablakai wait by the corpse of Shaik. Tablakai is preparing to leave, though Leoman plans on staying. A young woman and an old man come through the whirlwind of dust and Leoman tells the woman that she is reborn, to which the woman replies, "So I am." She asks Leoman to assist her in carrying the old man, but to avoid contact with his hands. Chapter 15. The Rag Stopper. Kalam Mekker and a sailor speak in the hold of the Rag Stopper, discussing the political situation and their impending journey. Following the conversation, Kalam heads to the main deck where he meets Sok Elan. Kalam distrusts him, but after a tense conversation, they decide to intervene together upon noticing the Aran treasurer berating the captain. Before violence can break out, the captain ends the argument, and calls Kalam and Sok to his cabin. He informs them that Admiral Nak has been arrested by High Fist Pormquel and tells them to avoid conflict with the treasurer. After a short discussion with Sok, Kalam returns to his cabin. Aran Harbor. Using Kalam's horse to aid her in disguising herself as a worker, Minala sneaks aboard the ship transporting Pormquel's horses from Aran. She intends to follow the Rag Stopper. East of Abarid. Diker listens to an argument between Captain Sulmer, Bolt, and Colton over whether the 7th Army ought to retake and defend Abarid. Citing tactical disadvantages and Nock's absence, Colton refuses to retake the city. With the discussion ended, Captain Lull asks Diker to follow him towards the back of the columns. They speak while riding through the army and wounded until they reach a small group of ex-servants purchased from the nobles. Despite sadness at doing so, Lull formally inducts them into the 7th and uniforms are distributed. Diker later comes upon Corporal List attempting to walk in a clearing, having injured his foot at the Battle of Gelia Ridge. List tells him he has received visions of the land ahead, and that it is the site of an ancient crime. After describing the one who gave him the vision, Diker identifies it as a jag hut and asks List to describe the vision in greater detail. Raraku. Felisin Paran, now Shaik reborn, sits near the site of Shaik's death in Raraku. Absorbed in her regrets and the deaths of those who escorted her, she is brought out of the trance-like state by the realization that Tavor Paran will be dispatched to put down the rebellion. she decides to travel to the encampments of the Army of the Apocalypse. Felisin walks along an ancient road with Haboric, Tablakai, and Leoman. They discuss the land's past and the relationships between them, tension growing between Haboric and Tablakai. Traveling ahead, Tablakai is startled. The rest arrive to find 7 partially eaten bodies at a camp. While Leoman takes care of the bodies, Tablakai leaves to kill the soul-taken responsible. Fiddler, Crocus, Mappo and Icarium walk in the desert near a city at the edge of an ancient sea. Icarium disappears while they are investigating the ruins, and Mappo rushes to find him standing between 7 destroyed ancient thrones. Icarium is confused and unsettled to find that, though the area has been thoroughly destroyed, a time-recording machine of his creation remains untouched. It says that nearly 100,000 years have passed since Icarium was last there. Fiddler steps forth and blames the carnage on an ascendant. To Mappo's relief, Icarium accepts the explanation. They prepare to move on. Leaving the island, the group is startled when Crocus grabs Iskral Pust, who was sneaking along behind them. With Pust in tow, they follow Absailor and her father's trail until they find the two standing in front of a threshold to a Warren fragment. Her father identifies himself as Rel-Lok and reveals that the two were creating a fake path of hands to lure divers and soul-taken to Tremorler. After letting their mounts go, they all prepare to enter the torn piece of Warren. Chapter 16. River Vathar. While observing the scenery surrounding the 7th Army, Diker is approached by Corporal List. List informs him that Corbelodom's forces have been seen, and that Colton wishes for Diker to ride ahead with the Foolish Dog clan. The two ride to catch up with the officers. Diker agrees to accompany the Foolish Dog but requests that List remains with the rest of the 7th. The Foolish Dog clan rides through the forest and reaches the river Vathar. They find the Salanda anchored near shore and Diker speaks briefly with Jessler. The Wiccans begin to set up defenses as Dom's forces are seen again, while Jessler, Stormy, and Truth speak with Diker and Nether. They reveal some information about their ship before Nether asks them to scout upriver. Having rowed towards the enemy forces while Stormy told the tale of the 3 Marines, they are confused to witness groups of archers moving across the river on ropes. After being spotted, they head back down the river and report their findings. Colton arrives with the main force and badly wounded soldiers are loaded aboard the Salanda for transport to Aran. A conversation between Jessler and Captain Lull becomes tense when Jessler says he will not accept promotion. Jessler threatens to punch Bolt, and Colton responds by punching Jessler's nose. His fist is shattered, and a startled Nil announces that Jessler's blood indicates he has nearly ascended. Before much conversation may occur, representatives from Corbelodom's army arrive and offer to allow the refugees to cross the river. Despite the nobleman's protestations, Colton refuses the offer. Raraku, Leoman, Felisin, and Haboric are breaking to eat on their journey across Raraku to the army of the Whirlwind's camp. They speak briefly before Tablakai arrives with the decapitated head of a soul-taken bear. Tablakai declares that Felisin must conduct a ritual, and before objections can be raised she begins. She has Leoman and Tablakai each open the Book of Drijna. Leoman sees blank pages and Tablakai sees something of great beauty. Haboric refuses to read the book and Tablakai attempts to kill him, but Haboric catches Tablakai's arms with magical hands and proceeds to throw him a short distance away. Felisin tells Haboric that he was not rejected by Fëanor, but chosen and prepared. Icarium, Fiddler, Crocus, and Mappo head to the edge of the Warren fragment. Fiddler suggests that Iskral Pust go first, but Crocus quickly enters the barrier. Pust and Fiddler follow him through, with Mappo, Absailor, and Rel-Lok entering soon after. They find themselves in a forest and begin to journey in the assumed direction of Tremorler. Exiting the forest, they find a plain covered in roots. They decide to camp and briefly rest. With the camp set up, Mappo and Rel-Lok speak briefly about the reasons for his cooperation with Iskral. Following the conversation, Mappo attempts to sleep, but overhears a conversation between Absailor and Icarium. She tells him not to tell Mappo that he wants to remember his past, bringing both Icarium and Mappo to tears. After a brief time the camp is broken and the group prepares to move again. Mappo confronts Icarium over the risk posed to him by the house, and is forced to reveal to him that Icarium possesses a destructive rage that has killed uncounted people. Icarium decides he wishes for the Azath house to take him, and they rejoin the rest of the group. Iskro reveals his hope for Icarium to help the house kill the many shapeshifters led there by the Path of Hands, but Crocus fears Icarium will destroy Tremorler. Crocus asks Iskro to call upon Shadowthrone for support. He complies and Shadowthrone sends Hounds of Shadow to assist them. 5 hounds join the group and they head toward the maze of routes leading to Tremorler. River Vatar. Gessler approaches Diker, Lull, and Bult to inform them that he will be leaving with the wounded on the Salanda. Diker departs for the command tent, where he speaks briefly with Colton. Their conversation is cut short by a messenger, who alerts them that a secret deal was reached with the nobleman. They have convinced the refugees to begin crossing the river. Colton orders the sappers to disguise themselves and hide among the refugees. Diker and his marine companion join them in time to see floating bridges approaching the crossing. Archers and pikemen on the bridges begin a slaughter. He makes it across the river, where he witnesses Sormo-Inath's death. Diker shouts to the refugees to ask for assistance with more approaching archers, and a horde charges the woods. In the river, angry refugees are climbing aboard and destroying the floating bridges. Diker grabs Nethbra and begins to choke him before being choked himself, losing consciousness. Chapter 17. The Ragstopper. Kalam Mekker, Sok Elan, and the Aran treasurer are dining in the stateroom of the Ragstopper's captain. The captain seems drunk. They are being followed by 2 privateers and the captain is thinking of attacking them at dawn. Kalam thinks this a mad idea. No one is quite sure how much time has passed since they left Aran. Someone keeps knocking over the hourglass used to measure time on the ship. Have they been at sea for 4 days or 14? The captain storms off when the treasurer suggests he has lost his mind and must relinquish the ship. The treasurer storms off when Sok Elan accuses him of looting Aran's wealth in cooperation with High Fist Pornquil. Kalam brusquely parts ways with his mysterious benefactor, who tells him he should be more grateful. On deck, Kalam observes the captain ready the ship to turn on their pursuers even as a storm looms. The bridge burner thinks this increasingly bizarre behavior is a sign of some affliction. The treasurer's 2 bodyguards tell Kalam their master would like to speak with him, but the assassin refuses. Instead, he tracks down the lieutenant of the Marines that have accompanied the treasurer on board. After he reveals his identity, they agree to look the other way if something happens to the treasurer and the melee to follow. The Ragstopper rams the first pirate vessel and the Marines rush to attack. As the 2 locked ships heave in the waves, Kalam goes looking for the captain and discovers both the first mate and Tiliman dead by the bodyguard's hands. The captain is lying unconscious next to the corpse of 1 bodyguard. Sok Elan comes to help. 1 raider is sunk, but the Ragstopper is flooding and all of her officers incapacitated. The treasurer has taken command and wants to surrender the ship. Both Kalam and Sok Elan concur that he is in cahoots with the pirates. In fact, the pirates are the treasurer's uncle and cousins. He orders the Marines to surrender their weapons so that the pirates may board and transfer the treasure to their own vessel. No one believes his claim that they will not be harmed. Sok Elan dispatches the treasurer's remaining bodyguard with a knife to the throat. Expecting no resistance, the boarding pirates are cut down by the Marines' crossbows. A mage among the pirates summons an encoral against the Marines. Kalam leaps onto its neck, slashing its wings until it falls to the deck and is slain by the Marines. Sok Elan eliminates the mage and the pirates are soon defeated. The victors weigh down the bound and gagged treasurer with sacks of coins and toss him overboard. Raraku, Felisin Paran, Heboric, Leoman, and Tablakai come within sight of the mile-high whirlwind that surrounds and towers over the holy desert Raraku. Felisin senses they are watched by spirits, causing Tablakai to reach for his weapon. But she assures him they are only curious. Heboric chastises her for thinking the rush of Sha'ik's power has given her wisdom as well. Tablakai asks for permission to slay the embittered historian, but Felisin says Heboric will have to serve as her wisdom since it cannot be gifted to her. Soon they will reach the oasis where Sha'ik's followers make their camp. Felisin takes Sha'ik's clothing and possessions from Leoman and dresses herself to match. Leoman says the high mages among the factions may resist her, unsure if Sha'ik still lives within her. Felisin says that although she has not opened the Book of Drigna, she is the Sha'ik reborn, and he must have faith in her. Then she addresses him with voice of her predecessor. Heboric says faith cannot be commanded, but is earned if one proves worthy. Saying the high mages have begun to lose patience, Felisin leads them forward. The Ragstopper. The ship is only a few days from the Falari Isles, heading for Bantra, the Ragstopper's home port. The captain has been confined to bed far longer than Kalam expected considering the extent of his injuries. Although the man struggles to form sentences, the assassin can see in his eyes that his mind is still sharp. Much of what he says seems like gibberish. Sok Elan attributes it to a head injury. A shout from Vol in the crow's nest alerts the ship to the sight of a fleet of Malazan ships heading north on the eastern horizon. Sok Elan identifies it as the fleet carrying adjunct to Vorparan and her army to retake 7 cities. He tells Kalam that recent events prove the two of them form quite a team. Why work alone when they can be partners? Kalam asks Sok Elan what makes him think his regular partner is not here with them now. He takes pleasure in the moment of uncertainty he sees flit across the mage's face. Chapter 18. Near Tremorler. Fiddler, Absalar, Crocus, Icarium, Mappo, Rellock, Iskropust, and the 5 hounds of shadow arrive at the entrance to the vast maze of roots that surrounds Tremorler. At their feet, they find 4 broken bodies that Mappo recognizes as nameless ones, priests of the Azath. He does not reveal this fact, but is startled when the bodies spark a memory in Icarium. The Jag recalls arriving at the ruins of a Trellish town destroyed by sorcery, and being welcomed by a similar robed priestess. The priestess admits to destroying the town in order to secure Icarium a companion. In his thoughts, Mappo refuses to disbelieve the story the Nameless Ones told him. That Icarium had been the one to destroy Mappo's village. Mappo identifies the bodies as Nameless Ones and both Absalar and Puss claim the cult as extinct, eradicated by Dancer and the Talons. Puss rants about the cult's arrogance, and begins explaining how they stood in the way of his master, and resented his entry into the Deadhouse. He is interrupted from saying more by a shout from Absalar, and the group wonders if it is the girl, or the god speaking. Mappo admits to Icarium that the Nameless Ones are the group that recruits the companions that join him on his travels. Fiddler says it is time to enter the maze. The maze. The group has been fighting their way through the maze closer to Tremorler. Fiddler is disturbed to see demons, ascendants, and alien creatures imprisoned within the maze's gnarled walls of root. All around them are the bestial sounds of battle as Soltaken and divers fight amongst themselves to reach the maze's end. Shan and Gear have taken off on their own while Baron, Blind, and Rude have remained with the group. Blind stays close to Icarium in particular. Their passage is interrupted by a battle between a giant bear and an anchoral. Mappo kills the anchoral before recognizing the bear as his friend Mesrem. He is too late to stop Rude from severely injuring the Soltaken and pushing him into the waiting arms of the Root prison. Soon Shan rushes to rejoin them from a head covered in small bites and Icarium senses the presence of the diver's Grillin. Mappo rushes to restrain the Jag as he begins to fill with rage. Fiddler and the others are filled with horror as Icarium teeters on the edge of rage. Even the hounds are unnerved. Then Fiddler spots a swarming wall moving towards their position. Raraku. Felisin Paran, Heboric, Leoman, and the Tablakai arrive at the outskirts of Sha'ik's camp. They are met by a young orphan girl serving as sentry. The Tablakai orders the girl to kneel before the Sha'ik reborn and she does. They proceed into the camp which occupies a ruined city surrounding an oasis. Leoman claims that 11 tribes with 40,000 cavalry riders reside there. Heboric and Leoman debate martial strategy until they reach the camp's central parade ground and palace tent. There, a large crowd gathers, and Felisin climbs a platform to address them despite Leoman's misgivings. In her mind, she strikes a deal with the whirlwind goddess and leaves her old life behind. The Tablakai orders the crowd of thousands to kneel before the Sha'ik reborn as the 3 high mages, Bidithal, Febril, and Lorik arrive. Felison declares herself returned and states the time of preparation is over. It is time for war against the Malazan Empire. She looks at each of the high mages in turn, assessing them based on the knowledge of the last shock. Each kneels before her, willing or not. She declares only one holy city still remains occupied by the enemy, and it is time for the army to march. As she raises her arms, an immense whirlwind rises above her, drawing in the winds that once protectively encircled the holy desert. The towering banner of the apocalypse stretches into the now blue sky and can be seen across the continent. The war has begun, and Felson thinks, "Dear sister, see what you've made." The maze. Fiddler fires flamer after flamer from his crossbow into the seething wave of rats as Grillin pursues them. Absailor notes that the divers has been strengthened by his victories against the other shapeshifters. There are now tens of thousands of rats instead of hundreds. They are soon rejoined in their flight by Gear. Icarium breaks from Mappo's arms and draws his sword. In response, the sky turns crimson and a vortex forms above them. The Jag slams aside an attack from Sean. Fiddler fires his last cussa at Grillin, but as it strikes he realizes that it is actually the conch shell given to him by Kim Locke, the Tano spirit walker. It breaks like glass and a song of bones erupts that devours the divers, culminating in a wave of water that drives them all down before disappearing and leaving them dry as dust. Icarium is knocked unconscious by Mappo and the hounds gather around the Jag. Only Mappo, standing over his friend, delays their attack. Fiddler demands Pust call off the hounds while Pust argues that it is time to give Icarium to the house. Mappo refuses despite his friend's earlier decision, and Fiddler aims a cussa at the hounds. Pust curses sappers and agrees to wait a while longer. Crocus tells the others that they are at the end of the maze and that he can see the house ahead. Chapter 19. Vathar Forest. Diker recalls the staggering losses at the Battle of Vathar Crossing, a battle which locals will remember as the Day of Pure Blood. Some 20,000 refugees are dead, a disproportionate number of them children. 700 soldiers of the 7th Army also perished. Only a dozen sappers and a score of marines still live. The Foolish Dog clan can field less than 500 fighters, and the other two Wiccan clans are almost as badly mauled. Sormoinath, Colton's most powerful warlock, is dead. The Vathar River runs red and black with blood for leagues, and it takes almost a week for the pallid, bloated bodies to completely wash out into the Dojal-hating sea near Abarid. The natives of 7 cities have little time to celebrate. A Malazan punitive fleet is on its way from Unta, commanded by a woman as hard as iron. What happened at Vathar Crossing was a whetstone to hone her deadly edge. As the chain of dogs moves south through the Vathar forest, the Imperial historian attempts to comfort the shaken Captain Lull. Amidst the trees, Diker sees cairns and evidence of ancient clan mass battles against the Jag hut. When the march stops for the day, Corporal List brings Diker to Colton, Bolt, and Lull, who stand before the last of the sappers. The Fist wishes to honor these soldiers for their bravery at the river. He calls forth one of the sappers and rewards him with a promotion to sergeant. After an uncomfortable moment, one of the other sappers informs Colton that he has just demoted Captain Mincer. Mincer is only too happy to take the reduction in rank and to recommend Sergeant Bungle as his replacement. Colton struggles to maintain a straight face as he follows through on Mincer's recommendation. Bolt and Mincer commiserate over their failed attempts to murder the lapdog, Roach, then Colton dismisses the sappers. Afterwards, Colton and the other officers can barely contain their mirth, and Diker's exhaustion dissipates. Before settling down for the night, List brings Diker to a ruined Jag hut tower. He identifies it as the home of the Jag hut ghost that has attended his dreams. He recounts the war between Clan Amass and the Jag hut that took place here involving the spirit's wife and children. Their ruminations are interrupted by the sight of a massive, golden-lit column rising in the north. Diker recognizes the sign of Shaik, the rag stopper. Kalam's journey by sea continues, now amidst a raging storm. A familiar trading vessel follows in their wake even as a strange luminescent green cloud rolls over them. Time no longer has any meaning and the assassin is unsure how much has passed since he left Aran. He suspects Sok Elon of sorcery, although the power to so thoroughly cloud the minds of the ship's crew seems too much for an associate of Mibra. Kalam has no choice but to use his shaved knuckle in the hole. He breaks the stone and is soon speaking to Quick Ben. The bridge burner mage is not in good spirits. Events back in Genabakis are not going well and he is being pushed to his limit. He is surprised that Kalam hasn't made it into the royal palace as planned, and even more surprised when the assassin reveals he is still at sea. Quick Ben reminds Kalam that this trick will work only once, but the assassin knows this already. He asks Quick Ben to seek out the source of the ship's problems, and the mage quickly determines that it is due to a strong mind-clouding Warren. He asks about Fiddler, and Kalam reveals that they agreed to travel on separate ways. The pair compare notes, and conclude that the Path of Hands is wreaking havoc with the Warrens. Fiddler's journey through Tremorler now seems unlikely, but perhaps Sari will make the difference. Their connection is cut off as Quick Ben tires and talks of having lost too much blood yesterday. Kalam is now on his own. The assassin enters the captain's quarters and finds Sok Elan already there. The man informs him that the storm has blown them off course. Instead of arriving at Unta, they will soon berth in Malaz City. Tremorler. Icarium still lies unconscious and Mappo Runt can feel Tremorler's desire to entrap the Jag. More and more the Trell doubts the actions of the Nameless Ones. He vows that Tremorler shall not take his friend. Fiddler says it is time to go. It is too dangerous to stay. Tremorler's captives do not look upon nobodies like the Sapper and the other humans with the same fearful respect as they do Icarium and Mappo. Fiddler is in the lead. Mappo carries the Jag while Apsailor, Rellock, and Crocus form a protective cordon around him. Iskro-Pust and the 5 Hounds of Shadow follow in the rear. Around them they can hear snarls and screams as the Azath house takes those Sultaken and divers strong enough to have reached the maze's center. The smell of spice and the sounds of battle herald the arrival of something powerful from around the bend behind them. Pust curses when it is only Moby, one of the accursed Bacarala, who appears and alights on a relieved Crocus shoulder. Fiddler realizes the familiar is much more than it seems. Mappo wonders how the magic in Kimlock's conch shell proved to be so powerful. He postulates that the Tano Spiritwalker was aware of Fiddler's destination and provided a gift specifically aspect for use against their enemies within the maze. The group finally approaches the walled yard of the Azath house, which Fiddler recognizes as a sister to the Deadhouse in Malaz City. They break into a run when 4 divers Denrabi burst from the opening of a watery Warren portal. Fiddler recognizes the beast as part of the same Denrabi he slew while crossing the Kansu Sea. The hounds quickly engage the Denrabi as a massive swarm of blood flies approaches from the distance. The rest of the party runs for the door of the house. The cloud of death bears down on them as they learn that Tremorler's door will not open. Vathar Forest. On the edge of the Vathar Forest, List shows Diker the boulder under which the body of the Jag Hut Ghost's 5-year-old son lies. The Tlan Amass shattered his bones and then pinned the still living child under the massive rock. The ghost's pain is evident on List's face. Diker asks if the Jag Hut ever sought to reason with their attackers. List says there were attempts to differentiate the Jag Hut from the Jag Hut tyrants, but that the Jagget's own arrogance and dismissal of the Amass proved their undoing. When the Jag Hut responded with barriers of ice to deny the Amass movement and food, the Amass undertook a ritual to make themselves immortal and able to move like dust carried on the wind. List and Diker agree that the chain of dogs should leave the area as soon as possible, and they go to inform Colton. The Dry March. The chain of dogs begins their long march across the Nenath Odin. The plain is devoid of food and water, and the last of the train's cattle perishes during the crossing. The soldiers and refugees die of hunger and thirst while fending off constant attacks from the local Billard and Trijan tribes. Corbulo Dom's army of the Apocalypse, now swollen to 5 times the size of Colton's force with reinforcements from Tarsian, follows from a distance letting the tribes do their work. A third powerful tribe, the Kundral, has yet to be encountered. Meanwhile, new refugees from Bylund place additional drains on the Malazan army's scarce resources. Lo rides up alongside Diker to commiserate. His men are dying from thirst at an alarming rate. As the army makes camp for the night, The pair make for Colton's command tent where they find the Fist, Bolt, Nil, Nether, Sulmer, and Chint. Newly promoted Captain Bungle follows her predecessor's example and is nowhere to be found. The warlocks sense something approaching this night, and Colton calls for the refugees to be kept close. They also prepare for tomorrow's battle despite having no water. It will be a slaughter. Suddenly a charge passes through the air, setting the camp's Wiccan cattle dogs to howling. The air rips open on the edge of camp and a massive fire-scorched carriage pulled by 9 horses races into their midst. It is Carpelin de Messend and the Trigall Trade Guild announcing that they come with food and fresh water as a gift from the people of Daruhistan who have heard of the army's exploits and their plight. Later, in private, Carpelin admits to Colton that he was sent by renegade High Fist Dujek One Arm with financial assistance from the Torrid Cabal. Dujek's message is that the Empress cannot lose Colton. To this end, Carpelin hands the Fist a smoky glass bottle on a chain and instructs him to wear it at all times. At first, Colton cannot understand how an outlaw can make commands of him in the name of the Empress. Then it becomes clear that Dujek's rebellion is a ruse intended to allow him to make an alliance with the Empire's enemies against the Panyandaman. Carpelin departs and the army rejuvenates itself on the supplies left behind. Liz tells Diker that he feels blessed or God-touched. At dawn, Colton kicks off the battle, not waiting for the enemy forces to stir from their camps. He sends soldiers charging at the still awakening Billard and Trigan tribes. Dom's troops soon began clashing with the Malazan rearguard, while tens of thousands of newly arrived Kundral begin advancing from the north and the south. A group of Kundral war chiefs directly approaches Colton's command position to parley. They inform the Fist that they have long awaited the day when it would be determined which of the tribes of the South Odins was the most powerful. Colton replies that the Wiccans are beyond such tribal concerns as they are part of the Malazan Empire. Colton flings the bottle he received from Carpelin at Diker. He would rather choose the manner of his death, and it is important that someone live to tell the tale of their sacrifice. Colton's army is unable to punch through the Trigan and Billard tribes, and Dom's forces push the rearguard backwards into their own lines. Defeat is inevitable. But Colton's fortune turns when the Kundral finally enter the fray. The southern mass of Kundral charge into the Trigan lines while the northern mass assaults Dom's flank. A third hidden Kundral force approaches the battle through the valley to the south to launch an attack on the Billard. Dom's force spends the next 4 hours driving back the Kundral, but not before his Semk, Canild, and Tythansi allies are shattered and the Billard and Trigan tribes are set to flight. Nearing dusk, a Kundral war chief returns to Colton. The Fist congratulates him on proving the Kundral as strongest of the Odin tribes, but the chief scoffs at his words. He raises his sword in salute and bellows. The answer this day. The Wiccans! The Wiccans! The Wiccans! Chapter 20. The Ragstopper. Kalam and Sok Elan stand on the deck of the Ragstopper. The ship heads toward Malaz Island, which is now a blurred smudge on the horizon. Elan speaks of the birthplace of the Malazan Empire in romantic terms. Kalam assures him it is a pigsty by the sea, and a rotten, festering, bug-ridden swamp. The ship's captain remains indisposed. Elan admits to admiring Kalam and reveals that he knows of the assassin's plans for Empress Lazine. Kalam denies this claim and demands to know what sorcery affects the ship. Elan says his searches have found nothing, but he theorizes someone is tracking them to make certain of their cargo. Kalam admits that he has contacts waiting within Malaz City, and Elan startles him by suggesting they await at Smiley's, the infamous tavern once owned by the former emperor. The assassin corrects him. His contacts will meet them at the Deadhouse. Tremorler. Iskarl Puss scrabbles to open Tremorler's door unsuccessfully. Mappo Runt fails as well. The Hounds of Shadow charge to rejoin Fiddler, and the others at the door to the Azath house even as the massive cloud of divers blood flies sweeps towards them. Suddenly Icarium awakes and begins to rage. Mappo attempts to restrain him even as the Azath house's yard comes to life and tries to pull the hounds and divers into its prison. Now Fiddler too frantically tries to pry open the door and fails. The blood flies are almost upon them and Icarium's anger is a palpable pressure. The Bacaro, Moby, clambers down Fiddler's arm, his shape seeming to shift and blur, and with a touch the familiar opens the door. The group rushes inside and Icarium's anger evaporates. Fiddler notes that all are accounted for except the hounds, who Puss says have made their escape. The divers has been taken by Tremorler. Moby is nowhere to be found and Puss angrily claims that Moby is a soul taken seeking the prize of the Path of Hands. Absailor assures them that the prize is not to be found here. They begin to explore the inside of the house and find the withered body of the house's previous keeper, a Forquil Assail. According to her stolen memories, Absailor notes that the layout of the house is nearly identical to the Deadhouse in Malaz City. Moby soon returns to Crocus Arms just before a merchant's bell is heard from outside the house. Fiddler opens the outside door, revealing a yard buried with tangled roots and humped earth. Outside the gate stands Carpelin Demescent of the Trigol Trade Guild. He delivers a package of Morinth munitions to Fiddler from Quick Ben and makes a hasty retreat. Back inside Tremorler, Absailor explains that Moby is in fact a soul taken, and a very large demon in its true form. It sought the prize of ascendancy, but instead trembles at the realization that it has been chosen as the house's new guardian. Further searching of the house finds the corpse of Dassam Ulter's daughter, left here by Dassam Ulter himself before he broke his vow to Hood. Finally, they discover the portal that will take them to the Deadhouse. Crocus tearfully says goodbye to Moby and promises to visit. Once they leave, Moby approaches a suit of armor in the house's hallway which welcomes him to the house, pleased that its solitude is over. Saniman and the Jeline Plain. Since the debacle at Saniman, an enraged Corbelow Dom has launched incessant attacks on the chain of dogs. The running battle has lasted over 40 hours as Colton continues to push southwards. His soldiers are dropping dead from exhaustion. Only 5,000 fighting men and women remain. On the Jeline Plain, Colton makes a decision. Diker will lead the refugees to Arran. Accompanying him will be the last warlocks, Nil and Nether, as well as a troop made up of the youngest Wiccan soldiers. The rest of the army will remain behind to hold back the army of the apocalypse. Diker does not want to leave his fellow soldiers, but he will do his duty. The Wiccan children are all the army has left. Diker says his goodbyes to Captain Lull, Colton, and the others. Corporal List sends his regards through Lull, giving up the opportunity to accompany the historian. "I have found my war," is the message. As Diker mounts his horse, his nameless marine hands him a scrap of cloth and asks him to wait a while before reading it. Diker leads his group south. The Wiccan youths are outraged to be sent away. Colton has gambled on the reaction of the local Karen Dobry tribe which has so far held back from the fighting. A pair of tribal elders approaches Diker and agrees to honor their treaties with the Malazan Empire. They will take payment to allow the refugees passage. They will also provide food and healing, and escort the group to Balon village. The gamble has paid off. That night at camp, the Coronel attend to the refugees, offering painful emotional release to those no longer familiar with gestures of kindness. Nether tells Diker that they have lost their linkage with Colton. He lives, but they do not know his fate. Nethpera and Pulik Aller inform Diker that the Council of Nobles has come to a separate agreement with the Coronel to purchase horses for their members. They plan to ride on ahead. Tumlet, who might have opposed the plan, has died unexpectedly. Diker forbids their departure and Pulik attempts to challenge him to a duel. The historian slaps him down unconscious with the flat of his blade and Nethpera says he will not forget Diker's actions. Balon village. Diker's group arrives at the squalid village that marks the start of the Arran Way, the Malazan road that covers the final 3 leagues to Arran. The historian thanks the Coronel and promises that the Empress will hear of their actions. They warn that a large force approaches quickly from the north. Diker gets the camp moving. He is determined to be in the city by dawn. Arran. Diker leads the refugees on a breakneck pace. Some die of exhaustion along the way. To the northeast, the appearance of a dust cloud indicates that whoever is following them is closing in. The group's vanguard spots the gates of Arran ahead. They are closed. 1,000 paces from the walls, which are crowded with soldiers, they begin to run. Diker rides amongst the stragglers, spurring them forward. Some are too tired to continue and sit down, giving up. At last the gates open, but no soldiers rush out to defend their flight. Only members of the Aran Guard appear at the gates to guide them inside, some running to carry stragglers the last few paces. Guard Captain Kneb finds Diker and orders him to report to High Fist Pormqual immediately. The historian says the bastard will have to wait until he sees every last refugee inside the gates. Kneb apologizes that the soldiers have been unwillingly ordered to stay on the walls. At last, all the survivors are inside but Diker, who pauses to look northward. Spotting the dust cloud reaching the closest of the barrow mounds that line the Aran Way, he turns his horse about and rides inside. As he does so, a great cheer rises from the walls. Shadow. Apt and Panic are in the Shadow Realm studying the barren landscape. The boy asks, "Mother, is this home?" They are interrupted by the arrival of a tall, black-clad man, who strikes up a conversation. He warns Apt that her generous reshaping of the boy will scar him in the years to come. He now belongs to neither Shadow nor his normal world. The demon argues back and clicks and hisses. The man introduces himself to the boy as Uncle Cotillion. The one-eyed boy informs Cotillion that even though he has 2 eyes, the man does not see. In fact, when the man approached, he walked through a stone wall and trees as if he did not see them. Cotillion is astonished by the boy's sight. He has often wondered why the hounds never run straight. Cotillion asks what memories the boy has of his other world. Panic remembers angry soldiers gathering him and the other children, then punishing them with crucifixion for not doing what they were told. Cotillion assures the boy he was not at fault. They hurt you because they could, because there was no one there who was capable of stopping them. Mother Apt and Uncle Cotillion will not let that happen again. The god says he and the boy can teach each other. The boy can show him what he sees of the shadow hold that was. Turning to Apt, Cotillion says he and Aminas must think on the proposal regarding the other children that she has put before them. He complains to Apt that as an ascendant he hoped to escape the nightmares of feeling, and now she has chained him. The boy asks if Cotillion has children and the god admits to a daughter, but they have fallen out. Panic advises him to forgive her, but Cotillion says it is for her to forgive him. Apt and Panic make ready to depart. She has debts to pay. Cotillion tells her to give Kalam his regards before disappearing into shadows. A puzzled Panic asks Apt if Cotillion thinks he now walks unseen. The Ragstopper, Malaz Harbor. The Ragstopper drops anchor at midnight 100 yards out from the Malaz city docks. From the deck, Kalam observes the old fortress of Mox Hold and senses that someone of importance is there. He was never supposed to be here. The plan had been for Fiddler to travel via the Deadhouse and then meet Kalam in Unta. As he ponders the sapper's chances, Kalam realizes he can no longer move. Sok Elon steps from the shadows, chuckling at Kalam's predicament and revealing himself to be Pearl of the Claw. He tells Kalam that although he truly admires him, the Claw have laws for those who abandon their service. Pearl tells Kalam that the Empress wants to speak with him, then sinks a blade into his side. It is not enough to kill him, but it will weaken him for the gauntlet of claw assassins awaiting him in the city. Pearl pushes Kalam overboard where the water will dispel the mind magic paralyzing him. Pearl turns away from the rail to finish the job of slaying the captain and his crew. He is interrupted by the arrival of Apt with Panic on her back. The Claw thanks the demon for her help with the Semp Godling before realizing the demon is here to help Kalam. It lunges and sends him crashing across the deck with a dislocated shoulder. The Claw then releases a Kenralad demon of his own. The demons battle as Pearl disappears by Warren. As the ship shudders and shakes from the melee on deck, the captain awakes for what feels like the first time in months. Making his way topside to see the battle between the two demons, he orders the crew to abandon ship in their dories. Acting First Mate Pallet grins and says, "Glad you're back, Carther," before the captain angrily cuts him off. The captain reminds him where they are and that he was supposed to have drowned years ago. The nearby trader vessel that has followed the Ragstopper all the way from Aran observes the sinking vessel. They are preparing to launch rescue boats when a woman on horseback plunges overboard in the dark. The captain, admiring her bravery and stupidity, orders the ship's mage to clear a path through the sharks in the harbor so that the woman can safely reach shore. Chapter 21. Raraku. The massive whirlwind towers over Shag's camp in the heart of the Raraku Desert. Heborek slowly climbs a ladder to where Felisin Paran stands on a rooftop staring southward. The historian warns her that of the army of the Apocalypse's 3 high mages, Lorik is the most dangerous. The others are less clever than they realize. Heborek concludes that Lorik is the only one of the 3 to sense that Felisin is not the Shag reborn, and that the whirlwind goddess and Felisin have made a bargain. Felisin admits that the goddess did not choose her, but that she seized power on her own. The 2 argue over whether Felisin is the pawn of some other power. Heborek angers Felisin by stating that Corbelo Dom is in the south committing senseless slaughter in her name. Felisin states that Dom acts in the name of the goddess, without instruction as she has sealed off Raraku, and out of fear and obsession. Felisin counters Heborek's argument that she has no chance of defeating her sister's forces by stating that Tavor is ignorant of her true enemy. The adjunct thinks she is facing a desert witch. Then Felisin pulls down the whirlwind to serve as a gate that will transport her army directly across the distance to Aran. Aran. Diker and his refugees are now within the gates of Aran. A distressed Nether clutches the historian's wrist and begs him to climb the nearest tower with her. The 2 reach the top where High Fist Pormquil is in consultation with Malik Rel. Pormquil frighteningly justifies his inactivity by claiming that the enemy are too many. Nether leaves Diker's side to cling to Nil, who is collapsed nearby. Aran's 10,000 soldiers line the walls screaming with helplessness. To the north, Diker spots Colton and his last 400 soldiers atop the closest of the burial mounds that line the Aran way. Out of bow range from the city walls, they are surrounded by thousands of Corbelo Dom's frenzied foot soldiers pushing violently inwards, devoid of discipline and eager for slaughter. They are close enough that Diker recognizes the Fist, as well as Bult, Mincer's sappers, Lull's marines, and Bent the Wiccan cattle dog. Diker demands that Pormquil do something. Order a sortie to drive to the mound and rescue Colton. Pormquil refuses, stammering that the enemy are too many. Only Aran Guard Commander Blistig's strong grip keeps the historian from the High Fist's throat. Malik Rel agrees with Pormquil and says the Malazans will eventually have their revenge. Turning back to the battle, Diker sees only 100 soldiers remaining, and these soon disappear under the mass of the enemy horde. Bult is pierced with lances and dragged down to be hacked to death. Corporal Lys dies at his side, holding the 4th Army's standard as he is decapitated. The last of the Foolish Dog clan are massacred and scalped for trophies. Bent is studded with arrows before being impaled on a lance, tearing out an enemy's throat in his death throes. Even Colton soon disappears and Nether begins to wail. Countless crows fill the sky, blocking the sun as a cross is raised on the mound bearing the still living Fist. Enemy High Mage Camus Relo is determined to prevent the crows from taking Colton's soul. As Nether shrieks in anguish, Relo blasts hundreds of the crows at a time with his magic. Commander Blistig summons the old archer Squint to the wall, and orders him to grant Colton the mercy of death. The distance is too great, and Squint trembles with outrage and despair, but he aims his shot for Colton's chest. As the arrow makes its long arc, it appears about to pass too high. But Colton suddenly looks up and the arrow strikes him in the forehead. The mass of crows descends on Colton's body, and when they disperse, it is gone. Squint moans with guilt. "Before the day's through, you bastard," Blistig tells him. 10,000 soldiers will be voicing your name. Like a prayer, Squint, like a hood-damned prayer. The Malazans on the wall are all in shock, as Diker thinks. Colton is dead. They are all dead. Chapter 22. Malaz City. A wounded Kalam Mekker pulls himself to shore under the Malaz City docks. To survive the swim, he has been forced to discard his shirt, chain armor, and weapons. He is able to slow the bleeding in his side through concentration before making his way into the city, thankful that clouds obscure the moon, keeping the streets dark. He breaks into a dockside warehouse and secures a leather blacksmith's shirt as well as tools that can be used as improvised weapons. Slipping out of the warehouse, he ambushes 2 claw assassins hidden within a sorceress shadow. Afterwards, he collects their gear including throwing stars, knives, a garrote, and a cherished claw crossbow, as well as a black hooded cloak. Now it is his turn to hunt the hunters. He soon discovers and dispatches another group of Claw. Kalam speaks to their leader's corpse and is soon communicating with the Clawmaster Topper. Kalam warns Topper that he is coming for him, even as Topper sends more hands to Malaz City through the Imperial Warren. Kalam eliminates one hand before they even have time to adjust to their new surroundings. Azath Warren. Fiddler, Absalar, Crocus, Mappo, Iskaropust, and Rellock find themselves in the Azath Warren. The ground is an endless mosaic of multicolored stones in all directions. Pust complains that Icarium should have been left in the hands of Tremorler, while Rellock notes that the stones in the tile at his feet form a map of the Canese coast as well as Kartul Island, and Malaz Island. Fiddler is astonished, considering this is only one tile among many extending for leagues. How many worlds must the Azath make their homes in? And how will they find their way out? Crocus curses when he notices that Pust has abandoned them. Then Mappo notices a ragged hole where Pust must have fallen. The mosaic tiles are revealed to be only an inch thick and the only thing separating them from an abyss. As they walk away from the hole, it fills in again without being observed. Later, Mappo and Icarium disappear unexpectedly through a different hole, nearly taking Absalar with them. The others are able to pull her back, and Fiddler quickly ties them together with a length of rope. If one falls, they will all fall together. With a gust of wind, 3 dragons pass overhead before plunging through the ground nearby. The travelers conclude that their friends are not dead, but that the Azath will let them pass through the floor when they get where they are going. Inside Aran, Corbelow Dom's warriors celebrate their victory over Colton within sight of Aran's walls. Meanwhile, Commander Blistig sets the Aran Guard to feeding and assisting the surviving refugees from the chain of dogs inside the city's north gate. Aran's soldiers are demoralized and anguished over High Fist Pornquell's refusal to let them assist Colton during his final stand. Diker wanders amongst the refugees seeking refuge in unseeing oblivion. The surviving Wiccan youths huddle protectively around Nil and Nether. No word has been received from the Salanda with its cargo of wounded. Adjunct Tavor Paran is reported to be less than a week away, and Shaak is said to be marching towards the city with an army twice the size of Dom's. Malik Rel is with Pornquell formulating strategy. Diker is shaken out of his stupor by Blistig, who demands he report to Pornquell. It is nearly dawn, and the High Fist plans to march out of the city at dawn and attack Dom's drunk and sated troops. Blistig says Pornquell has only the words of the noble Nethbra to go by, and deserves to hear the facts from a soldier like Diker. Nethbra underreports the number of enemy soldiers and blames Colton's failure on his own incompetence. Pornquell plans to empty the city of its defenders during the attack while leaving the Red Blades locked in the city's dungeons. Only Diker can stop a disaster. Blistig rushes Diker to Pornquell's presence, but the High Fist cuts him off, already poisoned against the historian by the counsel of Nethbra and Pulik Aller. He promises to arrest Diker and the Wiccan warlocks for treachery after the battle is complete. Nethbra gloats over Diker's fate, and the historian responds with a brutal kick to the noble's throat, killing him. He promises similar treatment to Rel, who he names Gistel, before Pornquell orders the troops to move out, taking Diker with them. Captain Keneb hears the word Gistel and wonders why it is setting off alarm bells in his head. By the time the soldiers surge out the gate, Keneb recalls a memory from the first days of the rebellion and races to find Blistig. Outside Aran, Pornquell's army marches out onto the plain, and Dom's army panics and breaks in front of them. The Malazan cavalry pursues out of sight beyond the burial mounds that line the Aran way, hoping to encircle the fleeing warriors. Pornquell, his spirits raised by imminent victory, and the infantry hurry to catch up. They find the enemy in a vast basin, but there is no sign of the Malazan cavalry. Diker is suspicious even before the routed troops suddenly turn to face the enemy. Soon the hills surrounding the basin are lined with Apocalypse horsemen. Pornquell's army is surrounded. Rel claims treachery, pointing at Diker. Then he persuades Pornquell that their only option is to surrender or face annihilation. Diker argues for a fighting retreat, but he is shouted down. Rel meets with Dom's representatives, and Dom agrees to take the army prisoner, with their release to be negotiated with Adjunct Tavor. They need only lay down their weapons. Pormquel agrees. Diker realizes what is really happening and releases his horse, saying it is the least he can do for her. Within an hour the army has been disarmed and Pormquel's 10,000 men await their fate. Corbeau-Dam and Camus Relo arrive to congratulate their ally Malik Rel, and Rel is pleased to deliver the city of Aran to them in Shah's name. Diker laughs in Rel's face, pleased to inform him that Blistig did not follow orders and remained behind with the Aran guard to hold the city's walls. Rel strikes Diker in a rage, but Dam holds him back. He honors Diker as a soldier by allowing him to share the same fate as his fellows. A confused Pormquel demands to know what is happening, and a war chief cuts off the High Fist's head with a blow of his towar. Dam demands the presence of the soldier who killed Colton with his arrow, but no one has seen Squint since the deed. Then the slaughter begins as Dam's soldiers descend on the unarmed Malazans. The dead and dying are dragged to the Aran Way, where they are crucified along the road's entire 3-league length. Diker is the last to be nailed to a tree at the road's northernmost extent. In unbelievable agony, Diker recalls the friends and comrades who await him at Hood's Gate: Bolt, List, Lull, Sulmer, Mincer, Culp, Haboric, and his nameless marine. In his mind's eye the Jag-Hut ghost of the Vadhar crossing appears to grieve him, its eyes filled with compassion. Then all goes dark. Chapter 23. Malaz City. Kalam Mekar fights for his life in the dark streets of Malaz City. He has already dispatched one group of the Claw and more are converging on his location. Using his knowledge of their techniques, he quickly ambushes another trio of hunters. He kills 2 of the assassins almost instantaneously, but is wounded in the process and loses track of the third. He slows his bleeding and hides, only leaving his cover when a Malazan ratter reveals his location with its barks. Bursting from cover, he attacks the remaining assassin only to realize that a third hand has arrived on the scene. He is saved only by the surprise intercession of the vicious dog and the arrival of Minala on horseback. As Minala fires her marine issue crossbow, Kalam pulls himself into the saddle behind her, and the 2 escape. Minala informs him that Empress Lazine is at Mock's Hold, and she races in that direction. The Deadhouse. The 4 remaining travelers in the Azath Warren, Fiddler, Absalar, Crocus, and Rellock, fall through the darkness, finally crashing to a flagstone floor. Fiddler realizes they are in the Deadhouse after recognizing the scent of Malaz Bay. Seeing a light, they descend to the house's main floor, where they find a Jag-Hut in the main room. The Guardian notes the group's failure to imprison Icarium in the grounds of Tremorler, and states that Mappo has walked at his charge's side for too long. Friendship should not supersede duty. The Jag-Hut Gahos reveals that Icarium is his son. Icarium had once attempted to free his father from the Azath without realizing Gahos was content in his solitude. The Jag wounded a Warren in the process, leaving himself damaged and without memory. Ever since, the elders of the Nameless Ones had selected watchers to monitor the Jag. After one such guardian took his own life, they were in desperate need of a replacement. They had convinced Mappo to be Icarium's companion by destroying the Trell's settlement and family, and blaming it on the Jag. Ultimately, the Azath had worked for a long time to prepare Icarium for capture at Tremorler, and Mappo had failed it. Gahos apologizes for his disappointment, and says he had such hopes for his son's capture. He asks the group to leave, indicating that a healing draft is near the exit door for those that need it. Fiddler drinks to heal his wounds, and the group leaves the house. The streets are dark and unnaturally quiet. Absalar recognizes the signs of Claw sorcery. Fiddler suggests they head to the Tavern Smiley's, but they are interrupted by the appearance of the demon Apt and Panic. Panic reveals that Kalam has gone to seek the Empress at Mock's Hold and offers to lead them there safely past the Claw through shadow. Mock's Hold. Kalam and Minala ride the stairs up Mock's Cliff when they are swallowed by a Warren. Within moments they find themselves within the old keep of Mock's Hold. They dismount and Minala explains how she followed Kalam from Aran, finally swimming to shore with her horse once the ship was stopped in the bay. When Kalam demands to know why she would do such a thing, she is angered by Assassin's obtuseness. Surprised by the breach of their open secret, Kalam is forced to acknowledge their feelings and admit that he is not subtle. Determined to assassinate the Empress, Kalam opens a door from behind which he senses great sorcery. Beyond is a room filled with unnatural darkness. The voice of the Empress invites him inside, and he enters. She startles the assassin by demanding to know why he has come to kill her. Kalam angrily accuses her of outlawing Dijek One Arm, attempting to murder Whiskey Jack and the bridge burners, assassinating Dassam Alter, Dancer, and Emperor Kelland, as well as possessing the faults of incompetence, ignorance, and betrayal. Lazine asks if she is permitted a defense against the charges. Kalam agrees, planning to use the time to attempt to locate her position within the room. The Empress reveals that Dijek's outlawing is a sham. Recognizing the rising threat of the Panyan Daman, Dijek needed a way to turn their current enemies into allies. The High Fist convinced the Empress that outlawing his forces would allow him to join forces with Kaladin Brood and his Rivi and Barghast, as well as Animander Rake and his Teest Ndi against a common enemy. Additionally, the Crimson Guard would no longer be a threat. Other than Dijek and the Empress, only High Mage Tashrin knew of the plan, and he was to serve as Dijek's shaved knuckle in the hole. The decimation of the bridge burners was unintended, and she apologizes for the High Mage's misguided efforts. While Kalam considers her words, the Empress also freely admits to ending the rule of Kelland and Dancer. She claims their elimination was a reluctant necessity committed with anguish for the benefit of the Malazan Empire. She likewise disposed of Dassam Alter as an ambitious rival who served Hood, and whose intentions would have led to civil war. She claims she has made grievous errors in judgment during her rule, but she has no regrets regarding the choices she made regarding these men. Sensing that Kalam has finally located her, she asks the assassin if Dassam would have let him approach this close to reason with him. Kalam accepts her argument, and sheathes his knife, audibly surprising Lazine. He makes to depart, and she warns that she cannot recall the claw. As a former claw, he says he understands that the claw deal with their own and returns to Minala. Afterwards, the darkness disperses from the room and Topper appears from a warren. The Empress is in actuality a corpse from which projects Lazine's voice. Lazine tells Topper she cannot afford to lose Kalam, but Topper argues the night will only result in a clearing of the claw's deadwood. Besides, he has his Lieutenant Pearl to vent his frustration on. Making their way out of the keep, Minala and Kalam take Captain Aragon hostage before they are attacked by 20 claw assassins. The attack is interrupted by the sorcerous appearance of Apt, Fiddler, Absailor, and the others. Kalam admits to a surprised Fiddler that he did not kill the Empress, as Apt brings them all back into Shadow. Apt brings the group into the presence of Shadow Throne, where Fiddler names him as former Emperor Kelland. The giggling man promises to reward his former subjects at the behest of Apt. Absailor extracts a promise to send her, Crocus, and Rellock back to her home in Itkoken while breaking all associations with Shadow Throne, Dancer, or any other ascendant. Shadow Throne offers to return Fiddler to the bridge burners, but the sapper refuses. He has decided to re-enlist with the troops headed to 7 cities to assist Adjunct Tavor Paran against the rebellion. To Kalam and Minala, Shadow Throne offers a place in his realm, taking care of the crucified children that Apt rescued. Chapter 24. Balan. Felisin Paran, Heboric, and the Raraku army of the Apocalypse exit the Whirlwind Warren at Balan. The village is still littered with corpses from the battle that took place there between the forces of Colton and Corbalodam. Leoman takes a patrol of scouts ahead while the High Mages, Bidithel, Febril, and Lorik, quest ahead with their own powers. Felisin senses their horror at what they find. The Shaik Reborn speaks of regrets with Heboric. To herself she regrets the falling out with her sister Tavor. To Heboric she mentions she has adopted the orphan girl Felisin Younger. They are soon approached by the commanders of her southern army, the triumphant Camisri Lo, and the coolly disdainful Corbalodam, as well as the shaken war leaders of the various desert tribes. At the head of the Aran Way, which is decorated with crucified corpses for more than 3 leagues, Dam brags about his victory. He admits Aran is still held by the Malazans, but the soon-to-arrive Adjunct Tavor is naive and untested. She will find no one to advise or assist her here. Felisin calls for Dam's army to join her own and make ready to return to Raraku. The Shaik will decide the time and place to meet her sister. The blind Heboric is drawn to one of the corpses lining the cedar trees of Aran Way. "Who is this man?" he asks. It is of course Diker, his friend. But Malak Rel tells him it is no one, and Heboric asks if anyone hears a god's laughter. No one else does. Heboric prays to Finner, saying his wayward son wishes to come home. Aran Guard Commander Blistig watches Adjunct Tavor approach the city palace with her aide Tambur and Captain Gamut. Captain Kaneb informs him that Jessler and the crew of the Salanda have disappeared after offloading the wounded of the Malaz 7th Army. The survivors of the chain of dogs, including Nil and Nether, have assembled for the commander's inspection. Blistig ponders how these troops as well as his own guard have been broken by their experience. Meanwhile, Squint is missing. Blistig makes his way to meet the adjutant. The Aran Way. Mappo rests while Icarium sleeps near the corpses lining the road. The Azath Warren had left them on the Dojal Odin, and they have made their way here. Mappo observes 3 men in an ox-drawn cart slowly move up the road inspecting each of the bodies. It is Jessler, Stormy, and Truth. They are looking for Diker. They are alarmed by the Trell's sudden appearance, but Mappo offers his services as a healer. Truth has recovered the dog's roach and bent from the site of Colton's fall, but Mappo thinks either will survive their wounds. Stormy checks the last of the crucified bodies. When Truth asks if it is Diker, Jessler and Stormy lie that it is not the historian. Mappo suddenly remembers the healing elixirs he carries in his pack. Tezim. Iskarol Pust arrives home at Tezim after his own journey through the Azath Warren. He begins shrieking as hundreds of spiders pour from his clothes. The spiders assemble into the diver's human Magara. She berates the Shadow Priest, saying she has been following him for months and is aware of all his schemes regarding the Path of Hands. The two argue as the undead soul-taken dragon that Culp once called the Unwelcome flies off from its perch near the tower. Pust is pleased that the dragon was not fooled by his trickery and had protected the true gate while he was away. Pust and Magra head inside where Pust suggests the witch can take up Reloc's former duties. Magra explodes with rage. The Aran Way. 2 Baccarala-like creatures named Erp and Rud lead an enormous, ornate wagon up the road. Servants of Barrack, they are here to claim the body of Colton, whom their master had gifted with a small magical bottle of smoky glass. Rudd finds the unrecognizable corpse with the bottle under its shirt. Peering inside, he sees that it has served its function and captured the soul of its wearer. He also finds a tattered note with only the name Silas Lorthel written upon it. Mortals are strange, he thinks. The creatures pull the body onto their cart. Near the Aran Way. Icarium awakes. He has no memory of any events since their sighting of Apt in the Pampatsan Odin. Mappo tells him it has been only a day since they lost the demon's trail. They decide to head west into the Jag Odin. Icarium feels optimistic about their prospects. I feel close this time. Very close, he informs the Trell. What would I do without you, my friend? Perish the thought, replies his companion. Epilogue. The Wiccan Plains. A pregnant young widow steps out of a horsewife's yurt and stops after 30 paces. The horsewife has told her that the child she carries is an empty vessel and without a soul. She has been given a medicine that will return the cursed child back to the earth. But as she places the flask to her lips, the horsewife stays her wrist and peers at the dark clouds gathering overhead. Seeing both fear and hope in the horsewife's face, the widow demands to know what is happening. Suddenly the dark cloud descends upon her, and she is enveloped by a seething mass of crows. As the horsewife gives wordless voice to the anguish of 1,000 grieving souls, the widow comes to a sudden realization. Deep within her, the child stirs. The end. That was a recap of Deadhouse Gates by Steven Erikson, Malazan Book of the Fallen, Book 2.